Right, Chairman, we're ready to go.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and good evening and welcome to this online meeting on Tuesday the 18th of August 2020. I'm Councillor Kevin Bentley and I'll be chairing tonight's scrutiny panel, and I'm the member for Marks 10 Layer Ward, and I'll be asking other colleagues to join in very shortly and introduce themselves on the panel. And I'm very conscious that this is their second evening at doing this, so congratulations for those who've come back for more this evening. Now, this meeting has been live via Zoom and over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel, and will also be available to watch afterwards. There's just a few matters of housekeeping to go through. As you've all done brilliantly so far, thank you, with the exception of the Democratic Services Officer who's be advising us, mostly me tonight. Will all participants please remain on mute and unless they're invited to speak when we come to the presentations or ask questions later. I will ask for each item of business to be presented and then ask each member of the panel in turn if they wish to ask a question or comment. At the end of each item of business, I'll ask each panel member in turn to confirm audibly how they wish to vote if we have a vote tonight. That will only be on recommendations if we have any as we go through. Now, I will take a break at 7:30 if we're still going, or at a convenient moment, depending on where we are on presentations. But I will confer with the panel first what they wish to do, what they wish to press on. Before we go any further, can we go through in alphabetical order our panel tonight? So you've heard from me, Councillor Kevin Bentley, will be the chair. Councillor Barber.
Good evening, Councillor Lewis Barber, Lexington and Braeswick Ward.
Councillor Bourne.
Good evening, Councillor Tina Bourne, Greenstead Ward.
Councillor Dundas.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Dundas, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Hayter.
Good evening, Councillor Chris Hayter, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Hogg.
Councillor Mike Hogg, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor McCarthy.
Good evening, Councillor Sam McCarthy, Shrub End Ward.
And Councillor Whitehead.
Good evening, Councillor Lorcan Whitehead, Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Can I just ask Mr. Clifford to introduce himself, please?
Richard Clifford, Lead Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. Are there any other Democratic Service Officers who wish to introduce themselves at this stage?
We'll have a couple of other officers on the call, but we'll just proceed, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And I'll ask everyone else to introduce themselves as we come to your presentations, just to keep it simple and easy for everyone tuning in tonight or later on. Item 2 is substitutions. I'm not aware of any. That's the full roll call you just heard. So we have every panel member here. There are no urgent items under item 3. May I ask if there's any declarations of interest, please?
Chairman, can I don't know which part of the agenda this would come under, but having received support of government grant via Colchester Borough Council for a small charitable business, do I need to declare that?
Well, if you do, I do. So we'll just take it, well, declare it anyway. You'll cover it then, because I'll do exactly the same thing that my company Mosaic received via CBC, a government small business grant at the beginning of the pandemic. Are there any?
Can you add me to the list, Chair, please? Thank you.
It's growing.
Are there any? Well, there's 3 we've got out straight away. You can tell. Are there any others? No. If you think of anything as we go through, obviously just indicate, and I will come to you through the course of that. And please, obviously, put your hand up so I can see you as well through the course of this. Do we run the?
Chair.
I can't remember.
Chair, sorry, I've just checked the report. I've made use of Colbea, which gets funding from Colchester Borough Council, so for one-to-one sessions, which I've made use of. So I better declare that interest just in case.
Thank you. So if you wish to ask a question, raise the hand. Or what I will do, as I usually do in my style, is after each presentation, I will go through each councillor by name, reversing the order around. So we'll get to go first and last and that sort of thing. But if there's something urgent comes up, please just raise your hand so I can come to you. Item number 5 are the minutes. I'm going to go through each councillor to ask whether they have any comments or whether they approve those minutes. So I'll go in the same order as before, but I'll change it around for next time. Councillor Barber?
No, looks all okay to me, thank you.
These are the minutes held on the 7th and 21st of July, just for accuracy's sake. Councillor Bourne?
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas?
Happy to approve them.
Thank you, Councillor Hayter?
Yeah, all good, approve.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg?
Agreed, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy?
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead?
All fine with me.
Thank you. Same for me as well. So that's unanimous. We approve both sets of minutes. Thank you very much. Item 6, there are no general happy or say on this at all, which is okay. So we'll then move on to item number 7. There are no decisions taken under emergency special provisions. Number 8, there are no cabinet or portfolio holder decisions called in for review. Number 9, A and B items requested by members of the panel and other members. There are no requests that have been received prior to the meeting. So we move into the main business of tonight. Now, basically, it is one subject, recovery from COVID, but from 4 different perspectives, which is very useful across the council and also council partners as well. We'll start at item 10 with the first, which is on the council's recovery programme post and during COVID-19. We have the leader with us tonight. I believe the presentation is led by Councillor David King, who is supported both by the leader and also by the deputy leader, Councillor Julie Young. And we also have Mandy Jones, who's the Assistant Director, Place and Client Services. I'm going to suggest, if I may, David, that you kick off. We won't interrupt you, and we'll wait till you finish, then we'll ask any questions we have. And your colleagues, I'm sure you'll invite to join in as and when you wish. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Welcome back. Welcome interruptions at any time. That's how it normally is, I have to say. Don't change for me. My remarks are brief, ahead of Mandy walking us through, and portfolio holders and the leader will come in as we think would be helpful, or in the Q&A. So some brief context before we get to that point. Important to look back as well as look forward. So right thing to say is that, like many others, local authority, government and business, our council lost some months to crisis and how best to respond. Others say that our work with partners, from swift organisational change to shielding to support to businesses, was agile, swift and done well. Now we're in a new normal, an enduring health and economic crisis. Our services are being provided, albeit sometimes in new ways, but in full. We are focused on support to those in need, and we continue to play our full part with our Health Alliance partners, Public Health England, the police and the BID, to ensure reopening, so crucial to economic recovery, is a success and stays a success in Colchester. Infection rates at the moment are low. We are keeping a robust and keen eye on COVID security and consumer health and confidence. They're crucial as we welcome people back into our town centre and into our businesses. The papers you have, as you say, are a spectrum. They cover all we do, or at least the heart of it. They reflect transition and a relative crisis maturity. But this is, and I counsel everybody to note the obvious, this is a work of progress, reiteration and review, with one strong weather eye on both the economics around us and our finances. So iteration is unavoidable. Indeed, iteration and refinement are essential. But what we have got here, and what officers will talk you through, is a comprehensive overview of progress and next steps. Our reorientation, I would call it, in response to COVID-19, with our eye, as I've said, on the economics and the recovery health of the council, our partners and our local economy. 3 particular points. Support to the vulnerable will remain crucial to us. Our plans for communities and on housing demonstrates that. We'll continue to place a priority for those most vulnerable and in need. We will, while balancing the books, which we eventually must, and bracing ourselves, as we all are, for tough times, continue to support and assist the many in need, to maintain our key services while adapting them. Secondly, business and the economy. We're better placed than many for the shock of the emerging recession, but how deep that will be and what all its effects will be is yet to be uncovered. It's a key priority for the council, for all members on this call, that we do what we can by how we buy, how we act, how we encourage confidence in the future, how we work with town centre businesses. So our relationship with the bid, how we work with them, is going to be governed by doing all we can with the limitations accepted on helping them survive and prosper. We have swiftly dispensed, I'm pleased that a number of members took advantage, over £33 million in grants from government and through our own discretionary scheme. We are providing high quality business advice. I hope that was the experience of those who have here or elsewhere through Colchester. We will invest in public realm. And lastly, partnering. This has become plain to us how critical this has been through crisis. Doing, we like to think, others say relatively well, has been in part a testament to relationships built and strengthened through the crisis. For me, it's one of the scrutiny tests of the future, will be where those relationships are, how they prosper and how they deepen. So health and alliance working, community working will be one set of relationships that will help us deliver, and that's reflected in parts of our thinking and parts of our plan. We will, as I've said, further strengthen or aim to do so our relationship with the bid and chair with the County Council to jointly deliver safer, greener, healthier cycle and less car-centric routes to town and ways of visiting the town and enjoying it, and with the support of the County Council to deliver a town deal that will build on our first steps towards a yet more attractive, vibrant town centre, public realm and cafe culture destination, Colchester. And it's been great to see two bureaucracies moving swiftly to do the simplest but sometimes the most difficult of things, like pavement permits. So my thanks to my colleagues, and I'll pass to Mandy Jones.
Just before you do, you give me cause to declare an interest, of course, because you mentioned Safer Health, Green Healthy, which is the scheme I'm operating with you and around the county. So can I just declare interest as the cabinet member for infrastructure, ECC. Mandy, thank you. Sorry, interrupting.
Good evening, Chair, Scrutiny Panel members. Thank you, Councillor King. My name is Mandy Jones. I'm the Assistant Director for Place and Client Services at the Council. Richard, would you mind sharing the presentation, please? Thank you. Oh, it's Gillian. Okay, so the report that you have and the appendix, which is the recovery plan, build on the Cabinet report of the 3rd of June, which outlined the programme approach and initial ideas for actions for the COVID-19 recovery plan. Since then, further work has been done by portfolio holders to shape and prioritise those actions, and balancing this against the significant financial pressures the Council's under as a result of lost income from the pandemic. Next slide, please. So just to recap, the Council Recovery Programme is split into 4 cells, and you see them outlined there: economy, community, council and customer. There's a set of cross-cutting themes that run through each of those cell areas, and those cell areas are just areas of work. The cross-cutting themes are commerciality, so how we can improve income and be more commercial. Housing is a golden thread that runs through all of these. Climate change and sustainability, we're ensuring that we're building our climate change and sustainability and climate emergency action plan into each of those cells. And as mentioned previously, we need to ensure we're balancing that against the Council's finances. So we have already undergone a set of short-term actions between May and July 2020, and that's outlined some examples in the report itself. The medium-term actions are the ones that I'm going to focus on today, and they're outlined in Appendix A. And those are the actions that are from July 2020, so the month just gone, leading up to April 2021. Next slide, please, Richard. So we are actually building on the Local Government Information Unit principles of recovery. And the Local Government Information Unit is a best practice organisation. So those principles involve building back better, so addressing pre-COVID structural weaknesses in the economy, for instance, developing economic and community resilience, and a particular note, sharing ownership with our partners. So doing a lot of work with partners and attracting inward investment for Colchester. The plan is agile, and I think really all that means is that we are going to be adaptable in our response to uncertainty, the uncertainty caused as a result of the pandemic. The different cell areas have different approaches. So for the community cell particularly, and the economy cell, and parts of the customer cell as well, a lot of the delivery relies on systems-based partnership working. So some of the actions are actually down to our partners to deliver with us, either influencing or supporting. But for the council, that's mainly a focus on delivery and recovery of us as an organisation. So the plan itself is outlined at Appendix A, with each cell area having a set of objectives and actions linked to them. And I'm going to go through some of these in a minute. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through this because this is outlined in the report, but this is the programme structure and the framework, the kind of governance of the way that the recovery programme is undertaken. But there are 2 points that I just wanted to emphasise, and that is that project sponsorship and the ownership of each cell is managed through the senior management team, with the development, prioritisation and oversight being undertaken by portfolio holders. And as well as having portfolio holders here tonight to answer questions, we have the cell owners here or their representatives to answer any questions that arise from each cell area. So myself, as well as leading on the overall ownership of the programme, I'm the owner of the economy cell. Lucy Bredman is here tonight to answer questions around the community cell. Dan Gascoigne, I understand, is here to answer questions around the council cell, but if not, I can take those away. And Jason Granger is standing in for Leonie Rathbone, and he can answer any questions around the customer area of work. I also just wanted to highlight the role of the Cross-Party Leadership Assembly in this work. This is an all-party group made up of group leaders. It meets regularly, and it's there to provide policy input, direction and support to officers, and use some of the learning that we are continually faced with to contribute to the future direction. It's also there to enable those members involved to raise awareness amongst their own groups and communicate the recovery programme to their colleagues, so that all members are kept informed of it. Next slide, please, Richard. So this is the first cell area, which is economy. I'm just pulling out of the report some examples. As you'll see from the appendix, it's 20 pages long, so I'm not going to go through everything as you expect here tonight, but I'm just pulling out some examples from the report. So the first objective is economy is about rebuilding the economy to be stronger in future. And this is about supporting businesses, building their resilience and harnessing opportunities from the crisis. And one of the opportunities, not from the crisis, but before the crisis, is our opportunity to bid for up to £25 million with partners of town deal funding from the government, and develop a town investment plan for Colchester. And this will be going to government in October of 2020. And that this is a partnership of private sector and also public sector partners involved in developing the initiatives around that. And they are based on skills and infrastructure and connectivity, for instance, and improvements to the town itself. And we have submitted a £1 million bid for early funding from that town deal project to have public realm improvements in St Nicholas Square and Balkan Gate. In relation to supporting businesses, we've provided funding to Colchester of 9.5k, and we're increasing that funding for the next year to 20,000 to provide support and advice services to businesses, including one-to-one sessions. Next slide, please. The second objective is opportunities are developed to ensure the economy is greener and more inclusive. And this is about ensuring sustainable models of growth and development. And that could include encouraging digital investment. So we are working with Essex County Council to implement their next phase of Safer, Greener, Healthier Transport initiative that Councillor Bentley referred to earlier. We're also looking at other sustainable methods of transport, and just a brief example of this is the rollout of our successful bid for electric cargo bikes, e-cargo bikes, and that bid was for 136,000 for a pilot for e-cargo bikes and trailers for greener forms of delivery for businesses. So we have a number of businesses and other public sector partners involved in trialling those. In addition, we're extending our local full fibre network, our gigabit broadband network, to the town centre. The high street works have been completed now. The town centre works are due to be completed by January 2021, and the MetroNet, the wider area, will be completed by May of next year. Next slide, please. The third objective is around the programme stimulating the local economy and markets, and we're doing this through construction and housing. And I think Paul Smith will be able to talk a little bit about this later. These are being delivered through Colchester Borough Homes and Amphora companies. So the completion of the construction of the Mercury Theatre redevelopment project, the £8.7 million project, that will be completed in the autumn. We're continuing delivery of our innovative renewable ground source energy supply at Northern Gateway, the district heat network. We'll be completing and opening Colchester Northern Gateway Sports Car Park, and the opening will come in the new year. That will support healthy lifestyles and cycling. And we're also gaining permission for 350 new homes, 30% of which will be affordable at Northern Gateway South. In addition to that, the local piece around promoting the use of local suppliers, we've been doing some work to review the procurement processes to build social value to encourage local contractors to bid. And I've just heard now that for one of our contracts, we've had 31 expressions of interest. The vast majority of those are from local suppliers. Next slide, please. The fourth objective, which has already been referred to throughout this, but actually it has its own objective because the town centre is so important, and that's about the town centre becoming more vibrant, resilient and adaptable. A lot of work will take place, and that will include the town deal around that, but a lot more work will be done to pursue opportunities to improve the public realm in the town deal. And another example is we're continuing joint working with the bid, and I think Councillor King referred to that, the Town Centre Task Force, and I know that Sam is coming tonight, but a lot of work has happened and a big programme of work about helping businesses to reopen safely, giving us confidence in the town centre post-lockdown. Another study for secure cycle storage solutions in the town centre will help the cycling and walking elements of our town centre. Next slide, please. So that's the economy cell. Just briefly going on to the community cell, the first objective for that is about sustaining levels of collaboration. We've seen significant levels of collaboration with the One Colchester Strategic Board throughout lockdown, and incredible work going on there to harness opportunities as a result of the pandemic, and work is continuing to shield vulnerable people during that. Reducing isolation and improving health and well-being. A lot of the creative partners have done a considerable amount of work through the pandemic. One example is a First Sight, a photography project that's just being launched to celebrate NHS workers. With First Sight, and Community 360 are also doing work around green prescribing, and this is about allowing people opportunities to improve their health and well-being and improve the environment at the same time, for example promoting cycling and encouraging cycling, and this links to the Council's Climate Emergency Declaration. The research that we commissioned from Anglia Ruskin University into community assets and health and well-being is also being informed, is informing the plan and the work that the North Essex Health and Wellbeing Alliance are doing to plan community services. Next slide, please. In terms of reducing inequalities within and between communities, we are contacting Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities to understand the impact of the pandemic on them and hear about any barriers they faced during lockdown. And this will be used to inform our plan going forward. We're strengthening volunteering engagement and building on community strengths, and Community 360 is really vital as a partner in that. Their volunteer centre is maximising and coordinating the volunteering that has happened as a result of the pandemic, and really making it more structured through action plans and improving training to enhance the volunteer experience and ensure we harness it. And we'll be updating our own community enabling strategy to focus on building on community assets, and this will come back to a cabinet meeting at the end of the year. Next slide, please. Restarting decision making. So this is the council cell. The most important bit for restarting council decision making has been enabling it to for people to participate in a digital environment, and we'll be reviewing those to enable the public to ask live questions in addition to making written submissions. Restoring and adapting council services is the next objective. And we know that a lot of people have been able to work from home, and many of us in the council are working very successfully from home as a result of the lockdown. And so we'll be reviewing our office accommodation requirements in the light of that. Next slide, please. We will also have to review and revise our finances to deliver a balanced budget, as has been referred to several times, and we'll be further developing our budget strategy to do that. We will also be reinventing our services to meet those new priorities and those budget constraints. And our budget strategy reflects that. We have a strand around commercial opportunities, which is about improving our income, looking at service efficiencies through continually improving our services and digitalising our services. And I'll move on to that in the customer cell in a minute, and looking at new delivery models. And in terms of the council's strategic priorities, we'll be reviewing those projects that deliver strategic priorities to make sure that they too deliver recovery, and that we can do them within the finances. And a revised strategic plan will be coming to the September cabinet meeting. Next slide, please. In terms of the customer cell, we have reviewed and are continuing to review customer access channels to ensure everyone can access services, and all customers are now able to access our services both online and on the telephone. We're keeping customers updated with the resumption of council services, so we've been doing that all the way through, but we're continuing with weekly social media updates and a continual review of the website to show how services are operated in the light of the pandemic. And we're also supporting our customers, particularly vulnerable customers, to ease the financial pressures caused. And in terms of our welfare benefits team, we have seen increased demand, and we're offering support to those vulnerable residents. We've resumed normal recovery processes on council tax, which does involve also proactive support to customers. And we did review our discretionary business grants and made the eligibility criteria more open so that more businesses could apply and gain those. We're also adopting new ways of working with customers. So our contact centre has been run from home since the start of the pandemic, and the performance has been excellent, which is really heartening. So we're looking at further improving digital processes to support that. And we're also looking at our other processes. So for instance, proactively working with customers to reduce payments by cheque, which we know are very resource intensive. So that's just a quick update on some examples from the COVID-19 recovery plan. Next slide, please. Just in relation to the future, I think really it's about the agility of the plan. We'll be continually updating and improving and adapting against the background of continual change, and ensuring we align that with our strategic priorities and our strategic plan. And just to say that we are led by insight, intelligence and good practice. So we're keeping an eye on the insight and on the intelligence. We're developing a dashboard of economic indicators. We're looking at what we can include in those to be able to monitor, for instance, our economic recovery. So that was it. I'll hand back to you, Chair, for the panel to consider the soundness of the recovery programme and the plan.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, first of all, Councillor King, and then Mandy Jones as well. Thank you very much indeed. That was an excellent presentation, I have to say, on both counts. Now, let's go to questions, and we'll start with, I'll go this order. So, you know, Councillor Bourne, Councillor Dundas, Councillor Hayter, Councillor Hogg, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Whitehead, and Councillor Barber. So, Councillor Bourne, do you have any questions?
Sorry, Chairman, Councillor Corey has his hand raised.
Oh, did he? I beg your pardon, Councillor Corey, sorry.
Sorry, I just wondered if you wouldn't mind me just taking a minute just to back up some of what was said, if that's okay, Chair.
No. Brave man interrupting Councillor Bourne is about to start, but off you go.
Thank you. I'm sure she'll also some excellent words. I just wanted to say thank you to Mandy for that excellent presentation, which obviously I'd seen before, and I know how much work has gone into that and gone behind that from her teams, but across the council. So for all the political knockabout, all the meetings we've had in the last few weeks to deal with other problems, this is the important stuff for our residents and for our businesses and our communities. And I'm really proud of the work that has been done during coronavirus and into this recovery period. So again, thank you to Mandy, but to all the officers that are here tonight representing all of the staff across the council who have been touched upon tonight in this presentation, whether it's the work they've done, whether the work they're doing now or going to do in the future. And I really think that we've also got Sam and Simon on the call from the bid, who I think will happily chip into some of this as well, because I think that we've had really good foundations. Number one is a reason why we're going to recover well, because we've worked in partnership with the bid, with the town fund participants, with One Colchester and the wider footprint of the public sector organisations and the cultural organisations and other voluntary sector organisations. So the good foundations have meant we're better set for recovery, but also the reactive work at the time during coronavirus, getting those grants out, getting support out to businesses, getting investment where we could externally and from other public sector bodies. And again, working with those partners at the time reactively, and also with yourself in your role at the county chair, to work in a reactive way to best support our public in terms of the virus at the time, but also looking towards recovery and how we build back better. And third, we have been proactive, and some of what Mandy has said about the surveys and the intelligence, but also the investment, the cold beer money, that has meant we are better placed to, again, bounce back. The construction industry that has kept going, we've worked with to ensure they're safely doing the work they're doing across the borough, and also the housing work as well. That's an investment where we're pushing ahead. That's good for our borough, but good for construction and work as well. And fourthly, it's sustainable. We want it to be a sustainable recovery in two ways. One, environmentally conscious, and that's something that, you know, I'm very passionate about, and it is thread through the whole recovery programme, but also sustainable in terms of the support we give to businesses, keeping those businesses going, keeping the infrastructure of the town going, the investment in high-speed, ultra-fast broadband, and many other projects mean that we are going to have a sustainable recovery. So I just wanted to thank, again, Mandy, the whole staff body, to Councillor King and Councillor Young for their work on this. And hopefully that gives a short, concise explanation of how proud I am of the council work. Thank you.
Leader, thank you. I think that's very loud and fair. Thank you very much indeed for that. I'm sure many of us agree certainly on the work of all the staff that have taken place. Councillor Bourne.
Sorry, Chairman, Councillor Young has a hand raised too.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Councillor Young.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put a few words to the panel, if I may. I think, you know, there's been a lot of learning, hasn't there, over the last few months about what we see as important and perhaps what we see as less important. And I think for me, what's come out of it is, and what has been fed back to us in terms of survey results, is the value people put on connecting with other human beings, because during this period, people have been very isolated. So going forward, I think in terms of shaping how we approach our work going forward, we're going to be focused very much on where the community can come together. And I know that there's been new ways of working, and there's had to be new ways of working, to be honest with you. But I just think, you know, just focusing a little bit of attention on how First Sight have actually engaged with completely new audiences, actually chair international audiences and people that have actually never walked through the front door of First Sight, for example. The Mercury, in terms of their digital you know, Panto rollout that they did, and they did Strings of Pearls as well to celebrate BE Day, and the Arts Centre in terms of what they did in terms of focus on improving people's mental health during this period. I think were really important things that we shouldn't lose sight of. And our own museum service did really successful reach outs in terms of museum at home, for example. So I think, you know, we've got a lot to look forward to. We are lucky in the assets we have in Colchester that we can take advantage of going forward. But I think our partnership with other organisations has never been better as a result of having to work together. And I hope that going forward, we will build on that relationship, as others have said. I think people, you know, need to be encouraged into the town centre. And we know we have an important role in actually making people feel safe about coming into the town centre. And I know that that's a subject that's close to your heart, Chair, in terms of the safer, greener, healthier work that you are doing. That's all I wanted to add. But I think it's been a tremendous learning opportunity. Something we wouldn't have wished, but something that we can use going forward.
Councillor Young, thank you very much indeed. Right, I better just check now. Anybody else before I go to Councillor Bourne? No? Right, I'm going to take the opportunity. Too late now. So Councillor Bourne, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. Well worth the wait. I'd like to add my thanks to everyone for Mandy's presentation, and actually all the work that has gone on from March onwards has been absolutely staggering. I'm sure that Councillor Paul Dundas and his predecessor Robert Davidson will agree with me that on the Leaders' Assembly we were privileged to have access to information that normally the Cabinet would have information to, and we were able to run through some of those decisions before they were taken. And I think that's of great merit to the council leader and the Cabinet to do that, because there was an awful lot of information coming in from all sorts of places. And sometimes there were some deadlines that were frankly ridiculous to respond to from all sorts of quarters. What Mandy has gone through, though, is it only really scratched the surface of the many different work streams that were started up from the beginning of March onwards. And what I'm interested in is speaking to colleagues in other local authorities all around the country. Not everyone has had the same experience as us. And I wondered whether those listening tonight, officers, portfolio holders, can grasp what it is about Colchester that makes us able to be so agile, able to respond, to be able to deliver so much, or particularly new things in Colchester. I'm not just saying the council, deliver so many new things to people who were so extremely vulnerable. Because should we have a local lockdown, should we have a second spike or a community outbreak, then that kind of learning is something that we don't really want to relearn. We want it to kick into action on that day. So really that's twofold. What is it about Colchester that makes us, in my eyes, fairly unique speaking to other local authority partners up and down the country? And what is it that we have learned that we will do perhaps differently next time, because we've been able to start new ways of working? Thank you, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. What I'll do is I'll run through a couple of members, then we'll go to officers to answer some of the questions in this particular case, because we've got 3 other reports to go through. And again, members, feel free to ask questions, but don't feel obliged to if you don't want to, if your points are answered. Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I would echo, actually, some of Councillor Vaughan's comments. I have seen much of this document before, and I have praised it in the past. I don't wish to repeat myself and go through it all again, but I haven't changed my opinion. As I said at full council back in July, I've generally been very impressed and very proud of the council's response overall over the last few months. Of its officers, its employees, and dare I say it, in many cases, its councillors. It's been a massive learning curve, but I am reasonably confident, actually, that we are in quite a good place in many respects. I think, particularly as Mandy highlighted, our relationship with many of our partners has been superb, and I think that really shows through. One thing mentioned, we spoke about the safer and greener and a sustainable and environmental recovery. That's something I think we always have to bear in mind as councillors. It's a challenge, and I think if we're serious about that, what we always have to remember is we will get it in the neck a bit in places from people if we're serious about it. And when we do, we all as councillors have to hold our nerve a bit sometimes. You know, whenever somebody gets stuck in a traffic jam because they can't drive exactly where they want at the time they want, sometimes we have to just accept that that will happen. I think in terms of questions, the only questions I've got really in the report, there's talk about that we're recommencing chasing council tax arrears. I just wondered, you know, how we're handling that, because it's quite a delicate thing to do at the moment for some people in the situation they're in, and where we think our sort of recovery target is likely to be. At the end of the year. The recovery target might be in there. If I've missed it, apologies if I have. And the other thing we picked up, which Mandy mentioned, was the long-term or medium-term office needs. I mean, firstly, realistically, if we're looking at potentially reducing our office space, by its very nature, if we're looking at reducing our office space, there's a good chance many other organisations in Colchester are looking to do the same. What do we think the actual realistic chances are of say, letting a floor in Rowan House or closing it or something? Just wonder what the thoughts are there. And the other thing is, when we're talking about working from home, yeah, it has been very successful for a lot of people, but I'm always slightly concerned that not everybody has the suitable facilities to work from home. You know, it's great if you're in a big house somewhere, but if you're in a 1-bedroom flat with a 2-year-old, it's not so good. So I wouldn't want us to get into a situation where long-term we are forcing people to work from home. And I'm just wondering what sort of checks and balances we're putting in place as an organisation to actually check up on people's working environment. And also, you know, check up on their mental health. Because I mean, for much of my life, I've worked for myself and worked on my own and worked from home. It actually can be quite a lonely place at times, and particularly if you're more used to an office environment. So I just wondered really, you know, are we checking up on people and checking their coping okay? Thank you.
Lovely. Right, okay, I'm going to go to officers, or in fact, I'll go to Councillor King first, and then you can disperse the answers who they're from if you wish. What I made note of from Councillor Vaughan was what makes Colchester unique, all the examples she gave. What's your view on that? I think that's a view rather than, because we don't actually know. If we knew, we'd bottle it and sell it, wouldn't we? Councillor Dundas talked about council tax arrears, letting space at Rowan House, and what checks and balances on working from home. So if I can start with you, Councillor King, and then obviously put out those questions to other people if you wish.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for great, of course, great questions from colleagues. On the first points from Councillor Vaughan, I have less time with this organisation than any of you, I think, but I can compare it with what I've seen elsewhere. And I'd offer 3 reasons why we've done relatively well and have a hope of doing so again in the future. I think we have to start with the quality of leadership and the quality of key people. And we are blessed to have people with experience and capacity and the kind of personal qualities that then unsurprisingly get reflected in the document we've seen today, or the documents plural, and in the response to the crisis. And that's the first thing for me. It has to start and end with our people. Second thing is there's been an unusual and a really heartwarming focus, intellectual focus on relationship beyond the organisation. You don't often see that. You know, I've grown up in a world, as many have, where, you know, there's a reason why you've got a door, it's to close it. And building relationships outside is hard work. And those of us who've done it, you know, it's productive, but it takes a lot of time and investment. So I think we were fortunate to have an organisational leaning into those relationships in health and communities in particular. And enough progress had been made, is what I hear. And Councillor Corey might want to add to that, for it to come right or get richer at just about the right time. And I think the third point on this question would be that having tough times before helps. The organisations had to go through a series of changes, significant changes, cuts, and cost reduction, and it's had to be adaptable. So the whole resilience of the organisation when it comes to shock is a lot better and a lot richer than I can glimpse in other local government organisations. So that's my response to that, if I may. And if I just deal with Paul Dundas's questions, I do actually fall to my part of patch, Paul. On council tax arrears, an absolute guarantee that both good sense and the approach being taken is a sensitivity to circumstance. And I've tested this and seen this, and I know constituents have been the receiving ends as well, and there is thoughtful application of appropriate pressure. We have to get the money in, but we're not going to go about this in a way that's unreasonable. There were several months in which we were stepped back from normal process, following the spirit, more than the letter, the spirit of the way in which government was encouraging the banks and themselves to act. And it's just going back now into more normal routines and rhythms. And it's always case by case. That's my counsel to the officers, and it's their response. Case by case judgments all the time, Paul, is the way that you do this well. It's too early to say yet. We are making some allowances, as you know, in the budget, for there will be, we think, some loss of income in both business rates, our part of it, and in terms of council tax receipts. But it's holding up a bit better than we had thought. The reason for that may be that parts of the economy are on a lifeline, and we don't know yet, do we? Yet where we will be, that will be clearer in the autumn. So far so good, but absolutely a sensitivity to that. Two other points for May, and I shall ask Mandy to come in on the office needs piece. The working at home, in talking to the HR team, and they're excellent, and I did this in a past life, they are better than I was at it, I have to say. They are really thoughtful, they're really on the game, they've got the data, and they know their people, and they use the organisational lines and line management up and down. It is, as you would expect it to be, very much tuned to circumstance. So they survey regularly, they take stock, and they make some adjustments. It's hard to say whether it's a perfect set of outcomes, because the circumstances we're in are difficult, but there is an absolute acceptance of the points you made that working at home isn't for everybody, and there is, I'm assured, a running conversation with staff to check how they are, how their managers see them, how they're finding the experience. And it would be fair to say some would have had some struggles, many have not. So there is a taking that experience and rolling that into your other question, you know, how we're going to work in the future. That's going to be really interesting, but I can give assurance to members that the way that our staff are being handled, as best I can tell, is well, sympathetically and thoughtfully and alive to mental health. So in simple terms, yes, checks and balances, you know, an organisation that's not just doing things to their people, but as best I can tell, is really alive to where they stand, knowing that that helps productivity and is the right thing to do, which is what we encourage. Could I ask Mandy to come in on the office needs point? That has played into some recent interesting online discussions about offices in Colchester. So I would just say one thing. I understand that from my state's responsibilities, that although there is a movement of demand away from office space, it is dependent on where, and it's dependent on the quality of the office space. So location will really matter, as will the premium nature of office space. And nobody yet is saying that's the end of that. We're all working at home. It will just be different. So my expectation is that the main effect will be not to suck out of Colchester demand. It will change its nature, more flexible ways of working and more flexible uses of space. But Mandy, perhaps you could come in on that.
Yes, so we do know that we're working from home very successfully, and we know that's might be what we need to factor in going forward. I think we need to look at our requirements going forward in the light of COVID, but also thinking about what our future requirements might be. So one of the things that has come out of this is the potential need for more collaboration spaces rather than sort of just desk spaces. So people getting together to collaborate. And we also know that in the light of COVID, the market is very uneven, as David Councillor King has just shown, and that there is still a real demand for very high quality office space that is actually you can social distance in. So at the moment, we're looking at our space requirements, we're looking at what we need, and then we'll be looking at the market against that. And when we're thinking about how we then plan our office accommodation going forward and who we bring into that picture. I think there is also a piece around the way that other people work and digital working hubs. So we've looked at the ability for people to work and put their laptops down, set down spaces. And we're going to look at a piece of research potentially into where that can happen. So we know in London there are spaces where people can come, they can set down their laptop, they can have a cup of tea, they can possibly print something and they pay some kind of subscription. We are going to look into what those spaces are, because actually we need to be aware of how people might work differently going forward. So there's several pieces of work going on at the moment. The first thing is that we have to assess our own need for space, and then we take it from there by looking at the market and assessing what we have against what we need.
Thanks,
Thank you very much indeed.
If I may just, so I apologise, Chair. If I may, one last remark might be relevant to this, which is from businessmen locally, an observation which I think we would share, that this council is fortunate and where our town is. Colchester's sufficiently far away from London not to be absorbed into its fully magnetic pull, but it's close enough to be a real choice for travel. And so there's a real interest in, and that's all we can say at the moment, a real interest in a model in which some organisations will choose to redistribute where their staff will be. Now we'll have to have, in Colchester, for that to be real, we'll have to understand what we have, we'll have to understand as a council what we can influence, but there is at least, let's just say this, an interesting marketing possibility as companies look at the balance of their people where they are, and as many will have done, look at what their staff will want. Now, this cycle of loss of opportunity will be replaced, we might hope, by demand, and it will matter that companies looking to the future are rebalancing what will work for their staff and themselves, and costs here are much lower than in London. So I do see at least a possibility to add to our understanding here what the market might be.
Councillor King, thank you. Mandy, thank you very much indeed. Now, I don't want to curtail anyone or make sure, I want to make sure everyone has a say, but as chair, I want to say we have 3 other reports to go. It is 5 to 7 and only 2 panel members have asked questions. I want to encourage everyone to ask questions and answer them. Can you be pithy in your questioning and reply? Please make sure we get through all. Because we have guests waiting to the end of the meeting. I don't want that to be 10 o'clock when they get on. Okay, right, let's go to Councillor Haytor.
Thank you, Chair. No, a very good report. A lot of detail there that was good. You can see a lot of hard work's gone in, and I don't think people appreciate how hard and difficult the team have worked to get this together in some serious circumstances. The only thing I want to go back on, it was Councillor Dundas asked about the counter-tax take-ins. Great to hear that it's holding up nicely, and I'd expect nothing else from CBC than to actually make sure we are going the right way if people are having difficulties. I'd be concerned, if it was any other way, and it's good to see it's not. The one thing that wasn't mentioned, I didn't hear back in the response. Clearly, there's going to be an adjustment of sorts. Has there been any figure that you've looked at, any forecast percentage? Because let's face it, there is going to be difficulties for some people going forward. I would imagine there might be a slight drop. Has this been taken into account at all? Do you have any figures or percentages to back it up? Thank you.
Thank you. Come to a second. I'll go to Councillor Hogg, then we'll do the 2 questions again, if there is a question for Councillor Hogg.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, a very comprehensive presentation and report there. It's not meant to be a criticism, it's just pointing out something I'd like clarification on item 10, 4.6, the recovery plan intelligence and insight driven, where it says that we have written to 2,500 businesses with a 15% response rate. Now, I don't know under the circumstances whether that's good, bad or indifferent. Maybe we could expand on that. Overall, I would say that as far as running a business is concerned, be it a small one for charitable purposes, it's been very positive what we've done, and all our officers and all those should be congratulated. I think there has been the occasional ill-informed comment on social media, which we can ignore, but apart from that, very positive. But if I could have an expansion on the 15% response, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So 2 questions again, Councillor King, I'll come to you, but obviously punt those out to other people if you wish them to. So the council tax figure, and the other was response rate from businesses.
Thank you to the first pithy. £1 million is the number we've published. It's several percentage points down on what we might expect, but I'll repeat my earlier remark. I think we might do better. It's too early. We will publish those numbers, Chris, because that's right. We're transparent about that. We're all interested in the budget. So more on that when we've got it. The second thing was about response rates. Councillor Hogg, Mandy and I note that it's a relatively low number, but it's informative nonetheless. And it's not the only source we have of business intelligence. And one other source is our regular dialogue with the BID. We're in close contact with their businesses. So I'll put it into context. We're picking up information from a variety of places, getting people often away from their businesses to reply to this was a reasoned response in our view, and we put it in the context, as I say, of it's just one source, and we are going out. We go out through others. We access other sources of information as well.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much indeed for the presentation. Like fellow members of the panel, it's very inspiring read. I'm more than impressed with how the council has and is responding. I've seen some feedback from businesses in my role on the policy panel and understand the difficulties and anxiety that business owners are feeling. So I'm just keen to understand a little bit more about the supporting and collaborating work that we've been doing with Colbert, which is a good thing considering how many businesses and startups that we have in Colchester and those that are kind of looking to start up a business but are reluctant to do so currently. So I was just keen to have a bit of an expansion on that. How is that work with Colbert going? Because it's been, what, 3.5 months?
Thank you. And Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. I have lots of questions, but I will heed your desire not to keep our guests waiting too long tonight. And if
by all means, ask your questions. It doesn't need to have involved big speech around it. By all means, ask. Okay,
I'll keep it brief and I'll ask 3. My first one is so we're heading into we're actually in a recession, aren't we? Although it's difficult to believe yet because it hasn't quite started to bite. And I'm wondering. I didn't see much in the report around anything we might be doing to support our residents through the disruption around employment. Do we have any plans for that around perhaps skills training, stuff like that, that we are intending to put into practice? My second question, I'm very glad to see the focus on social value procurement. I just wondered if you could expand a little bit on what that review has meant in concrete terms. So what were we doing and what are we or will we be doing differently? And thirdly, with the return to office working, obviously this is, there will be staff who really want to go back to work. There may be also staff who have anxieties around that, and there is risk involved. So I'm just wondering what safety measures are in place around staff returning to the office to work, and is it an optional thing, or will staff who do not want to work in the office, if they're able to do their roles from home, will they be allowed to do so? And I should have said at the start, I echo everybody else's comments about thanks for the comprehensive report and for the work that everyone's put in this period. Absolutely, working around the clock, it's right that we recognise that. Thank you.
Thank you, President. First class, I have to say. So my comments, I want everyone to ask questions, as many as they like, as it doesn't involve a big speech, right? And that's exactly how to do it. So well done, Councillor Whitehead. So questions there on Colbia from Councillor McCarthy. Then on the recession, what are we going to be doing differently? And what about people who don't want to work from home? Councillor King.
Thank you. The great questions, of course. On Colbia, I shall come to Mandy in a moment, as she's been intimately involved in those discussions, but we've shared the headlines on this, that we're providing support to many dozens and in turn over time some hundreds of businesses. And there's my clock. Bear with me just. For those who are not aware of the passage of time, it is now 7, I can confirm.
And it's the reason we don't want to be here at 10, all right?
Exactly right. You could not stand it. It's bad enough for me being in here. I was here to 9, and my thanks to Lewis for his chairmanship. I mean that. Okay, so on Colbia, this is a rich relationship. We understand how well it works for them. I'll ask Mandy to give you a little flavour extra. If I could go to you, Lorcan, if I may. Great question, and the truth is, we're reminding ourselves we don't know yet what the impact will be in its local scale. We know we can see a bit more reality, that there is no bounce back for those, Chair, like you, who had to go through this before, the panel did. Which graph do you believe represents our future? The bounce straight back never worked for many of us. And now we're seeing that's true. We see a 20%, 20.2%, I think, reduction in GDP for the quarter, and we're edging back up. You can take one cheer at least for, I think it was 8% increase, but the local effects what matters. We don't know. Nobody will. No model I've seen yet gives us a clear indicator. Mandy was talking earlier about our local work and its early stages of wanting to track, so we're tracking how unemployment claims, universal credit and things like that are going, but they only give you a partial insight. Talking to the bid gives you some others, but again, I think we just have to say we're some months off getting the kind of insight you would want, we want, and we will then be sharing. We do know that skills and competence matters, the two things together. So in some fashion, we will be doing what we can. So Colbia is one illustration. This is people who are running often small businesses. They often have the most need for help, support and advice. We'll continue to look at that. We've given extra funding towards that. That will help them. I expect that we will be working with the Institute and others to see if there's anything else we can do. We're supporters of the great stuff that they do, but I think it's going to have to be a game that is in part response to events as we find what we can. We're a good employer, that will matter, but we are also, let's be honest, preoccupied with resetting our own clock as an organisation, how we manage our own people and what we'll have left of the organisation. It certainly will be differently shaped and probably will have, we have to say this frankly, somewhat fewer people in it, but we want to use them well and work with partners. So there's lots of change for CPC and others. On the second point about social values, thank you for raising that. I've moved from just marginally sceptical to a fan, I have to say, but it's too early to say. Yes, thank you. That's a good remark on my part. Too early to say what the real effect will be. We'll need to see a period of time. We need to see what happens to contracts award. I have asked that that data be collected. You have to give us some time. What I am told makes sense is that the effect of looking at what drives your scoring and decisions on contracts awards, and we are a reasonable sized employer. Dan Gascoigne, I can see holding his head, he might have something to add later on in the background, will have an effect upon thoughtfulness of employers. So we're encouraging people to say where their workforce are from. We're encouraging them to recognise, and we're encouraging business to see opportunity in Colchester. I think the effect of all of those, which is more than social value, will be to improve our impact locally.
Thank
you. I could go to, I beg your pardon, just could go to Mandy on Colby if there's something.
Oh, I beg your pardon, you did say that. I'm sorry. Yes, of course, please.
Okay, I'll be quick. We do have regular monthly meetings with Colby, and they give us monitoring statistics as well on the number of people that they've seen. And the latest ones we have is June, because we haven't had the meeting for July yet. But there were 147 contacts in June, which was a 61% rise on contacts year on year for their one-to-one advice and support and on their advice line. So we do have those meetings. We know that there are a number of younger people contacting them. We know that hospitality and leisure had started to contact, and that they're mostly around business planning and strategy. So it's people wanting advice around starting up businesses too. So they've had several, well, quite a few people contacting them about starting new businesses. We won't know the full effects of unemployment until I think the furlough has ended. I think that will have an effect, so we won't know the full effects of that. But in relation to skills, we know that the town deal has one of its major criteria is around skills and employment and encouraging those. So we will be looking at how we build that into our town deal going forward. Just to add to the bit about local suppliers and procurement, we are looking at our processes to encourage those suppliers. So we've written out to local suppliers to say, please do express interest for some of our contracts. And we're looking to provide training and guidance and review our processes to make it easy and nudge those suppliers to go online.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers and Cabinet members who have come along this evening to present this. I think a quick contextual point for my questions is that it's quite easy to forget how rapidly our lives changed back in March. We've sort of taken the new normal in our stride, so to speak, but actually over a course of a week, the world just changed unprecedentedly, and the organisational shift that we've seen and being put under more pressure is very commendable, and we tend to pick up on some of the things we want to improve, but because there's so much we agree and support with throughout this report and elsewhere. But in light of the world changing, our lives changing, I just want to ask a few questions about, in particular, policies that we had started beforehand and carrying on into the future, notably the town deal project. And I know we've been getting updates on this matter, and in the middle of lockdown where days were blending into each other, nothing told me it was the weekend more than seeing Councillor King's updates on Saturday morning dropping into my inbox, which included updates for members on issues such as this. But I was wondering if, as it's a public meeting, we could just gain a bit of a gist if there's any changes to the town deal bid we've put in, to understand more if in reaction to COVID we've had to change anything in that regard, or if not. The second point I wanted to just ask about is people with disabilities, and we rightfully identified, I feel, in the report, addressing pre-COVID structural weaknesses, and that's really the big national conversation that's happening at the moment, is some of the deep inequalities and lack of opportunities has been really made worse by the crisis. So just asking, because in the report it's not mentioned people with disabilities, it's mentioned in the context of Government Select Committee and our responsibilities under the Equality Act, but a quick Control F, we don't really mention about the role people with disabilities can play and how we have to improve for their lives going forward. We have some fantastic schools in the borough for people with disabilities, and I feel that I want to make sure they are part of the conversation going forward. So in any future reports, could we just have a discussion about how we're what we're doing in regards to people with disabilities and how we can change their lives in the borough, because we actually have a higher than national average percentage of the population who have disabilities in the borough. And finally, for now, my question is, we mentioned also about focusing on young people and the BAME community. I actually messaged and virtually met up with Black Lives Matter Colchester and their founder, because I felt it was important to reach out to people who say they feel they do not have a voice in our society, notwithstanding some of the discussion about the national organisations' wider political opinions. But I felt, you know, these were local people with that I had a duty to speak to. So I was wondering, have we spoken to organisations such as Black Lives Matter or other organisations, and what exactly, maybe a bit more detail on the priority on young people and BAME comment in the report, just to flesh out a bit more of those details. Thank you. But that is all for now. Thank you, Chair.
Actually, that's kind. Again, Councillor King, I'll come to you initially.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, Lewis, thank you very much. Town deal first. That one I can deal with. I'll ask the council leader, who I know has had his own contacts with BLM, if he wants to add anything on the quality issues, or Councillor Judy Young. Actually, I see Councillor Judy Young has raised her hand, so perhaps we might go there. But on the town deal piece, the criteria from government is essentially the same. That's my understanding. There have been some revisions. So if we go back in time, then go forward, what we've lost is time because of COVID, as we've discussed. The central thrust is the same. However, we are sure that the recovery underpinning, which was there before, you know, go back to levelling up and all of that, you know, the honourable aim to improve towns as places to live and places to work, and which work better, which is then expressed in language, right? So those tests, those half a dozen tests, are still there, but our expectation is that the way that our proposals will be looked at will be just that much more keenly at one level, because, as I say, when you're heading into such difficulties as a nation as we are, then there is the challenge is that much greater, that we can make a link between this, the criteria, and the recovery effect. So that's, I think, it's a coloration is what I would say to you, rather than, that's my own take anyway, rather than a change. A reminder that we haven't got a bid yet. If Simon Blacksword, yeah, Simon is there, Simon has periodically blessed our work and given us the direction, but it's work in progress. I will think about that need to share where we are with all members. I want to ensure that you, Councillor Barber, do have a Saturday morning email from me. We need to go back to that as soon as we can. But so it's work in progress. The tests, I think, are primarily the same. Coloration is different. I hope that government's purse is open long enough. It's been open for everything else. To support this when we go through, I'm sure we'll construct, you know, a powerful bid supported by those from government who want us to do well, as they will the other bids. So I think I hope that's comprehensive enough, more than enough probably. So on the, Julie, perhaps you might pick up for me on the BAME, young people, and the approach to equalities, which actually, in my view, governs everything. It's our attitude to all we do, is the impact upon all of society.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. It's really interesting questions from Councillor Barber. I think certainly we've strengthened our relationship with the BAME community during this period, and practical things that have happened is the with the Colchester Islamic Society in terms of providing space at St Bottle's Priory for Friday prayers. And we've been instrumental in negotiating the use of the Mercury Theatre rehearsal space at the Garrison Gym for them to move into, you know, for the forthcoming period of months while the mosque is having its refurbishment. So we do have strong connections with Black and ethnic minority groups. I just point to the work that the Mercury Theatre have done, and First Sight in terms of the Super Black exhibition, and more latterly the exhibition which is called Tell Me the Story of All These Things, which I was involved with in terms of co-curating an exhibition there with a diverse range of ethnic minorities that worked on that project. And I think First Sight does a really good job in terms of connecting with the BAME community in Colchester. I personally have attended both the public process that Black Lives Matter have conducted within the town centre, and I know the leader of the council has been involved in the sort of organisation that's been set up in Wivenhoe as well. So it is important, I think, that COVID certainly has expanded on the inequalities that we have within society, and, you know, not people talked about being in small flats in terms of being able to work and how difficult that might be in a small flat. And I think for those families that were isolated for all that time, there was a big difference between whether you lived in a house that had a nice garden and lots of access to public open space, and those individuals that perhaps live in very small accommodation with a family to accommodate. And I think, you know, going forward, and we're going to talk about housing in a minute, Chair, but we need to be providing homes that are large enough for families to live in and have adequate facilities for outside space as well. That's another topic that we'll move on to. So there's always more we can do with the BAME community, but certainly practical, there's been support during the last few months.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, just a few very quick points. I say three very quick points from me. I'll come to you, Councillor Corey. I just want to ask my questions, if you don't mind. First, I'll come to you just at the end to wrap up. Okay, so just slightly more to the point questions around the practicalities. Weddings are allowed. Are we now actively promoting the town hall as a wedding venue again? Also, in terms of when we meet as councillors back at the town hall, have we, or do we plan to survey members as to how they feel? And are we thinking maybe we could do hybrid meetings with some joining on Zoom, some actually meeting in person? Because obviously no one can get there, and it does mean for those who do work in London or elsewhere, they could actually participate, do that mad dash on a train back, but also encouraging members of the public to take part and ask their questions. That would be very good. In terms of staff, have we done any form of survey? So do we have any feeling, we don't need to rehearse the questions we just asked, and they were very good answers, by the way, but how staff are feeling and how many we anticipate could work from home or would want to work from home in the future, and what that then means for our estate, which we've touched on. And what I'm thinking of is, are we then thinking of partnership working with the NHS, with Essex County Council, with Tendring Council, with Colchester? And with Colchester, of course, the one thing we learned about the last recession is the number of startups that happen as a result of it. Therefore, there's an opportunity there that they could use places like Rowan House and others. So very quick questions. Councillor King, I'll come to you first.
Thank you, Chair. Some of these I will spread around through a lack of the knowledge needed. In terms of the approach on partnership, there's no question that we will adopt the one public estate approach. So the conversations that lie ahead will absolutely look to see how the state reinforces our ways of working. That will move, that could mean we've been exploring this, moving people in to Rowan House and working alongside council officers, as well as moving out and doing it differently. I know we have surveyed, I haven't got information on more than that in terms of staff approaches and attitudes. I'm happy to actually sort of share what we've had most recently or the next version of it. That might be of interest to you and others. Let's take that away. The hybrid, the weddings, I know events team have been instructed and of course want to raise income. I'll ask Andrew Tyrrell, might be the first person to go to, if he can give us an update on all of that.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you, Councillor King. We will probably come on to this under the Amphora item.
You can answer it then. Yeah.
But
I would want to cut short, but if you're going to answer it later, that's absolutely fair. I'd want to preempt something later. That's fine. Thank you.
just very briefly, we have recommenced that, but yeah, we'll talk about it later. If
yeah, lovely. No, of course, absolutely. No, that's fine.
Thank you.
In terms of, so what else did I talk about? Members, and getting back to the hall.
Perhaps the leader might want to talk to that.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, we have brought this up at one of our leaders' sessions, which Councillor Bourne referred to earlier and Councillor Dundas did as well, and they're really helpful in understanding for disseminating information and feeding back information for members. And I think the feedback is we're really relishing the opportunity to log in from anywhere. I logged in from a pub in North Norfolk last week for the full council meeting, and it just about worked. But it's about ensuring we provide for members and for visiting residents the opportunity to come in. So we will be doing that with a hybrid method. We've had it so far where the mayor has been supported in Rowan House, for example, and because the town hall is seen as the civic seat for our democracy, I think it's important that we do that. And I'm in discussions with the Democratic Services team about how we have possible camera for people to come. I know Sir Bob Russell has mentioned being able to come along and speak, and that can be done. A chair could be there with officers in socially distanced in one room. And if members want to come in, I think there was mixed reviews that Councillor Dundas said to me about the Conservative group, for example. Same from our group. Most of us would want to actually remain digital as much as possible, but there is about a feel of collaboration that we get with staff. It's also the same with members. So yes, a hybrid system. We are not going to make everyone come back immediately unless some government regulation changes. It's about seeing how we can best serve members and have a hybrid system. I wondered if I could just go back to
by all means, carry on.
Some of the other questions. Thank you. It was on the useful questions that Councillor Barmer put forward about disability and about Black and ethnic minorities, because actually we've been doing work prior to COVID and during COVID about looking at inequalities, and many of those inequalities will affect people with disabilities and lack of movement. Then we've got the impact of COVID further accentuating mental health problems as well, so the unseen disabilities. And furthermore, we've looked into the BAME impact. And I want to be really concise, so I won't say any more, but Lucy Bredman, if you're there, please, because I know you've been leading on this work with Pam Donnelly and the Alliance Partnership and the ARU funding that we created to do this work. Would you be able to just say a few bits on that, Lucy, if you're there?
Yes, yeah, I can do. So there were two key bits of work. We did research with Anglia Ruskin University, and I think actually some of the insights that came out of that work go to one of the first questions that were asked around what makes Colchester different. And actually for me, there's something around the fact that, you know, there are so many strengths in our communities. There are people with amazing skills. There are physical assets, places that people go that are really, really important to communities. And actually that piece of research really showed how important they are. I think they galvanized themselves at the start of the COVID response. And one of the most important things that we did as a council is we didn't try to step on anybody's toes. We just worked with communities, helping them, trying to support them, trying to give them whatever they needed to get on with the amazing work that they were doing. And our voluntary sector were just superb. So I think that Anglia Ruskin University research really fundamentally showed us there that we need to build on that going forward, and we need to make sure that whatever we do in the future, we don't lose sight of those brilliant assets that we have out there, whether they're people or they're places. In terms of the BAME community work that we've been doing, we really were trying to talk. It's all about storytelling. It's people telling us what their experiences are. So real qualitative work. And what they told us was that, language was an issue for them. Access to translated information was a problem for them. Access to cultural food parcels. The food parcels were going out and just didn't have the sort of food that some of our residents can eat. That immobility is an issue for many. So again, what we've been doing is trying to make sure in any second wave, in our continuing shield work, that we do more and more to make sure that that people are supported in different ways. And I think talking to our faith groups as well, the huge impact that the loss of that community getting together to practice their faith had was a real issue. So again, looking at how we can support more digital use going forward. So they're some of the things we're doing. We're learning all the time. And the community response team working with our voluntary sector partners have got some great plans.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to everyone who's presented, asked questions and answered those questions tonight. Extremely good. Now, can I just...
Apologies, sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, Councillor Whitehead.
It's just, I did have one question that didn't get an answer, and I was very greedy and asked 3, and it must have been missed off.
Oh.
But I just around the staff returning to work, I just about the safety measures and whether staff who can work from home, if they want to continue working from home, will be able to do so.
Oh right, yes. Councillor King.
The leader is nodding as well. My understanding is, as you'd expect from a good employer, this is, as we described earlier, a sensitive set of conversations. Some people are very clear what they want to do, others will need to talk through and understand what their safety will be, and the safety of our staff is everything here. So absolutely, this is good business management, good people management. But we're not going to be bringing people back into the office. We're going to do this well with them, and it will change, I'm sure, but there's going to be a continuing conversation. And just like the wider town, COVID, security and confidence are really key.
Yes, thank you. So, it probably got wrapped up slightly in my how we surveyed the staff, but you're right to pull that out, Councillor. Thank you. Right. Now, in conclusion, could I suggest to panel members a recommendation would be that we thank and commend all portfolio holders and officers for presenting and attending tonight, and that maybe we request quarterly updates on certainly the COVID response and the COVID update. That's what I'm suggesting. Does anyone violently disagree or would anyone like to second that or amend it?
Agreed, Chairman.
I just need someone to second it. Can I take that, Mike, that you'll second that, please?
I will, Chairman, yes.
Thank you. In which case, we just need to do the votes. I'm going to ask Mr. Clifford to administer the vote, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll just call out the committee names, and if you could say for, against or abstention. Councillor Barber.
For.
Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Bourne.
For.
Councillor Dundas.
For.
Councillor Hayter.
For.
Councillor Hogg.
For.
Councillor McCarthy.
For.
And Councillor Whitehead.
For.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Now it's nearly 7:30. I'm going to suggest we have a 10-minute break. I just want to reassure colleagues, certainly from the bid, that we are going to get you tonight, and we absolutely promise not to hear Councillor King's 10 o'clock chimes by the time we get on. Okay, so can we just have 10 minutes so people can just have a brief break and be back here just before 22.
I did notice, Chair, that Councillor King mentioned resetting the clock by, according to Microsoft, his clock is 1 minute slow.
Useful contribution, thank you. Right, I think we just need to switch our cameras off.
Yeah, if you could switch your cameras and your microphones off, please, councillors and guests.
You all right there, Mike?
It's shattered. Had a heavy day yesterday and another heavy day today, and another one tomorrow. Yeah. And would you Adam and Eve, the storm this afternoon flooded the Oak Tree Centre.
Ah.
Mike, Kevin, did you have a storm this afternoon? Because nothing was immersed. It was bright sunshine all afternoon.
It was crashing and banging around. We had about a foot of water in about 25 seconds. Flooded the downstairs.
This stuff is really localised, isn't it? I mean, it really
absolutely.
Is.
Yeah, it was torrential on high woods, really bad.
Yeah,
nothing at all.
Yeah, we had about 2 inches of rain in about 40 seconds. Seriously, flooded with 2 inches of water.
Drains just can't cope with that volume going down.
Well, can't cope. Yeah. Well,
I blame my ways.
Yeah, all roads lead to me. Don't worry, it's all quite literally.
Very quick, David. Very quick.
Sorry, members. Can I just remind you, we're still streaming.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Well, it's true. Roads still all lead to me. Yeah. Right. So it's a fact. Right. Are we all back? Just see. Particularly panel members, can I ask you to switch all cameras on, please?
Boo.
Good. I think, are we all here? That's Carthy. Yep.
Councillor Whitehead.
I can't see Councillor. Yeah, he's here. Councillor Bowles back. Yeah, right. So I think we're all here in terms of panel, which is good. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Let's move on to our second paper, which is of Colchester Borough Homes, and we've got Councillor Fox presenting, supported by Mr. Gareth Mitchell, who's the Chief Executive. So, Councillor Fox, can I go to you first, please?
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair and panel. I'm just going to give a brief introduction and then hand over to Gareth to present this evening. As you've heard, housing is one of the cross-cutting themes, and Colchester Borough Homes plays a pivotal role for the council in delivering our priorities and vision for the people of Colchester. And as the panel already knows from previous meetings, CBH have been really important to our overall response as a borough to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the council's arm's length management organisation, they deliver a range of services for us, housing and beyond, including housing options, homelessness and rough sleeping, antisocial behaviour. They discharge a number of our statutory obligations as a social landlord, and of course they're involved in a range of commercial and house building projects with us too. But I think most importantly, over recent months, they've demonstrated that what they do is they support their customers who are our residents. And COVID's presented a number of additional areas of work. One of the most high profile is around rough sleepers. And I think that the work that they've demonstrated in this particular area is really impressive. But they've also worked to support residents in sheltered housing and supporting the welfare of tenants. I truly believe that that Colchester Borough Homes and Colchester Borough Council developed an exemplary model of partnership over recent months, with CBH integrated in the cells that were established to respond quickly to COVID-related issues. And that meant that all the key people were plugged into the demands and information from central government, as well as showing what action was being delivered on the ground with a range of partners, with the work that went on centrally in Essex as well. And I think this worked across all levels, and I'd like to place on record my thanks to Gareth and his team. The recovery is really key and will deliver on our priorities. And I like to simply put these as housing, jobs and community, three key areas that are vital for a happy, secure and fulfilled life for our residents. Through the capital programme, CBH will support housing and house building through repairs as well, and supporting local private sector contractors restarting work. Working with the council and Amphora Homes to deliver our ambitious plans for council built homes. And this is a programme that stretches over the coming years to tens of millions of pounds worth of investment in our borough. And finally, CBH have strong community links with their tenants, leaseholders and other community and voluntary sector partners. And these are vital in providing a lifeline for some of our most disadvantaged residents and those who are most likely to be impacted by the recession and the economic fallout of COVID-2. Gareth's got a great presentation to take you through, and I'll hand over to him.
Many thanks, Councillor Fox. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. My name is Gareth Mitchell, and I'm Chief Executive of Colchester Borough Homes. Gillian, could I ask you to share the presentation, please? Thank you, and next slide. So, councillors, thank you very much for the opportunity this evening to present to you on our recovery plan on COVID-19. I wanted to cover three areas. The first is to describe to you the approach we took to recovery and the progress to date. The second, a little about the framework and the methodology we used, in particular to show what Councillor Fox has just talked about, which is the really close alignment with the Council's recovery programme. And also for you to note that our recovery stage will complete at the end of this month, and then we will move on to what we see as a transformation stage in the services we deliver for our customers and for you as councillors. Next slide, please. So in order to describe to you our recovery activity, it's important that I begin with what our response phase looked like, so you can see the shift. So we triggered our business continuity plan on the 18th of March. This meant moving to critical service provision only. And as you can see on the slide, that meant daily contact via telephone with all of the council's tenants in sheltered accommodation in support of Operation Shield, bearing in mind the vulnerabilities, particularly within that client group. That meant moving to an emergency repairs service only to make sure that our tenants' homes remained safe and our tenants remained safe during lockdown. Maintaining, importantly, a customer service phone line and online contact, where we were enormously supported by the council's customer service team, and maintaining at the same time a housing options and homelessness service, so we were able to continue to meet emerging homelessness need as it happened even during lockdown. Also during response phase, there were some other significant measures. Councillor Fox has already referred to some of them, particularly government guidance that prevented and still prevents evictions, limited letting of properties, and also access to properties. So amongst other things, this meant the pausing of our capital investment programme, the work we were carrying out in tenants' homes, and other more intrusive activity in homes because of the shielding agenda and the guidance that the government put in place. I was struck by Councillor Barber's comment earlier about within a week things changed. I remember vividly the week where we saw housing accommodation providers closing on the Tuesday as non-essential businesses and sending people back to us, and on the Thursday being asked to accommodate all rough sleepers by the end of the week. That was a busy week, to say the least. But I'm really proud of the fact that my team did the most remarkable job of supporting what's referred to as the Everybody In project to accommodate people who are rough sleeping. We broadened our approach under Operation Shield to make welfare calls to other vulnerable customers. And you know, a real value I think here is almost within days of the government making it clear that a key role of local government was shielding, we were able to very, very quickly move to do that for those customers who we know and therefore we know are in need. And of course, as you'd expect, it meant closure of offices and moving to full agile working as an organisation. Next slide, please. I won't go into the detail here, but this slide is intended to show you two key things. One is the integration of our plan with the CBC plan. So you'll see at the top the themes that Mandy Jones has already spoken to this evening, and below are the cells that which we use to manage our recovery project. An organisational focus under our organisation, a business focus supporting both the economy and customer themes within the council's plan, and a customer and community cell which align very closely with the council's work. And this formed the key structure for our recovery. Next slide, please, along with the objectives that we set ourselves, which are listed here. First of all, to reinstate service delivery, taking into account the new risks to ensure the health and safety of our customers and our staff and our contractors. To use the recovery plan as a business transformation opportunity to retain the beneficial new ways of working we had put in place overnight in March and April, to make best use of technology in the workplace and delivery of services, to strengthen our business continuity plan to ensure minimum disruption for any future outbreaks, and to use our existing community plan to continue to develop local partnerships, which, as I said before, has been key. Next slide, please. And as you can see from the report that I've provided, we are now in a position where all our services are now recovered, some in full, some under social distancing measures. Backlogs that built up under lockdown where we couldn't complete works have all been completed now. And our plans to resume services we've designed in such a way that we aim to deliver our original annual plan by the end of the financial year. Now, in some areas, I'll be very candid, that's a big ask, but we've set ourselves that challenge nevertheless. And I want to just briefly, before handing chair back to you, to just highlight the key areas in each of the three sections of our plan. The first being our organisation. So members of the panel have already asked questions about office accommodation. Clearly, we occupy a number of the council's buildings, but one of our first challenges was to ensure our space at Rowan House was COVID secure. Also, some of the services we deliver, whereas they can be delivered very well on a remote basis, there are sometimes a small number of occasions where my staff really do need to see the customer in person. So creating a COVID secure interview space at the Greenstead office was always an early priority as well. We needed to implement new working practices, not least to make sure our staff and tenants were clear on how we would behave when we came to work in their homes. And of course, the key challenge was to give confidence so that we could get work done as we came out of full lockdown, as well as working in the community and working in our office. We wanted to make sure our governance arrangements remained fit for purpose so the council could be assured that the board were abreast of the issues unfolding, and so all our board, committee and resident panel meetings continued virtually. Indeed, the board has met much more frequently to make sure they are influencing and making decisions around some of the challenges we've faced. And as you'd expect, lastly on this slide, ensuring the health and safety of staff and customers has been critical. So getting risk assessments, method statements in place for working safely, individual risk assessments for staff who have vulnerabilities, whether that's because they are clinically vulnerable, or indeed for those staff who are of a BAME background who may want to go through that process. We've made sure they're in place. And of course, things like display screen equipment assessments, having the majority of our staff working from home. Next slide, please. In our business cell, and Mandy Jones has already referred to this, we were fortunate that we were able to continue the work that we do in partnership with the council and indeed with Colchester Amphora Homes in this area. So the Mercury Theatre project has continued throughout, and we are principal designer and contract administrator for that project. And as well as that, some of the build projects, particularly the rebuild of Elfrida House and some of the housing development work where we work in partnership with Amphora Homes, we were fortunate that our work was in a design phase, which meant that that work pretty much could continue unaffected through the process. I've referred to our capital programme. We clearly needed to get our programme back up and running to continue investment in our tenants' homes, obviously for operational reasons to ensure we were moving forward with the council's investment plan. But we saw this as one of our key contributions to the council's economic stimulus work. And we've worked really intensively and closely with our contractors to assist them in restarting work, whether that was supporting them with risk assessments or indeed giving them confidence that they could bring staff back off furlough because we had the volume of work for them to deliver. But we've seen that as absolutely key, particularly for local contractors, but indeed for those that work on a more regional basis as well. Enabled by the fact that over 80% of our tenants have said that they were happy for us to recommence work in their homes, which was a key factor. As I mentioned a moment ago, we've caught up our repairs backlog and we resumed a full repairs service on the 5th of August. And finally on this chart, the health and safety compliance work we do on behalf of the council, for which the council is regulated by the regulator of social housing, was clearly impacted by lockdown, and we have been really focused on that position, managing it proactively, monitoring it, and making sure we're in the best possible position. And I'm satisfied that we are probably ahead of the game nationally in terms of where housing providers are from a compliance point of view. Next slide, please. And finally, our customer and community cell. I'll come back first to the work to accommodate rough sleepers. You'll see we accommodated 38 rough sleepers in that week I referred to. That ended up being a total of 57. Not only was that intensive work by the CBH team, but back to some of the comments panel members have made, that work would have not been possible without the amazing support of our partners as well. And we hugely appreciate that. But our recovery work is this potentially once in a lifetime opportunity, having provided accommodation and worked intensively to support these individuals, to exploit the opportunity to be able to move them on into more permanent housing with appropriate support. And you'll see that we are well through that process, still with a number of people to accommodate, but that has been a key focus for us in recent weeks to try and make the most of that opportunity. Indeed, we're anticipating, hopeful of funding, working closely with our CBC colleagues to support some of that accommodation cost through the Next Steps programme the government has announced. We've continued to offer important support to our customers. We've made over 4,000 welfare calls to vulnerable tenants. And again, messages you are hearing repeatedly this evening, the support of our voluntary sector partners in particular has been critical there, and we value those partnerships enormously. We've been able to put in place a much more efficient process for viewing and letting properties, and we're moving that to an online process, which will pay dividends beyond recovery. So we are letting properties again. And in terms of community safety and community confidence, we have really stepped up our communication with tenants and customers during this period. But at the same time, we have had to deal with significantly increased levels of antisocial behaviour, particularly as we've moved further through the lockdown period. And finally, the challenge of making sure we meet our commitment to the council to collect rent while at the same time supporting tenants and recognising the ban on evictions, which means that for those difficult cases where we might ordinarily seek possession of the property, we have had to be very creative in how we respond to that challenge. And then finally, if I may, before I hand back to you, Chair, our challenge now then beyond the end of August is to capitalise on what we've learnt, on what we've put in place, and to seek to transform the way we work with our customers and our communities and the way we work as an organisation. And there are several opportunities there. Some of it is around this contact and engagement with our customers, which in some ways has been greater than for quite some time due to lockdown. And I know Councillor Young was talking a short while ago about the importance of that contact, and we want to build on that. As I've mentioned, we want to seize the opportunity to support individuals who've been rough sleeping to change that lifestyle and to be able to sustain accommodation. But we also recognise that with the ending of the furlough scheme, with the end particularly of the ban on evictions next week, we absolutely anticipate increased pressure on our homelessness service in the future, and we need to be ready to deal with that and to fulfil our responsibilities to the council in doing that. Councillor Bourne earlier on asked a question about what makes what's different about Colchester. I would just put my halfpenny worth in to say that you know, I think the working, back to Councillor Fox's comments at the beginning, the seamless way in which we have integrated with the council's emergency response has been remarkable. I think it's meant that I have been able to collaborate closely with council senior management colleagues, brief cabinet members directly, but the payoff has been that I have never been short of the information I needed ahead of time to manage your housing management business and to be ahead of the game when it comes to responding to the challenges. So I'm hugely appreciative to council colleagues for that. That has worked extremely well. And the other one I would finish with is to say that we have really benefited from such strong, capable partners who have stepped up along with us to deal with some of these challenges. You can probably tell I'm enormously proud of the work that my team have done, but also of partners who've stepped up with us. And at that point, Chair, I will gladly hand back to you and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, and thank you indeed, Councillor Fox as well. And yes, absolutely, I think another first-class report. And the one thing that keeps coming through all of this conversation isn't about partnership working as a team in Colchester, wherever that may be, everyone pulled together to make this work, and that clearly has come through here. And you should be commended also for the work on the rough sleepers. Now, I'm going to go through the councillors again, and to the point questions, if we may, please, starting with Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, Chair, yes, to the point. As you said, I usually find that everything which comes out of CBH to be of a high quality, and this report's no exception. It raises lots of questions and then proceeds to answer them, which is exactly what we want. I think the only comment I'd make or question really is that there's quite a lot of talk about moving to digital solutions. I guess, I mean, CBH has long been at the forefront of moving to digital solutions 10, 15 years ago, doing things which others weren't doing. I just think, though, I'm sure a lot of this is actually about internal procedures, but obviously, I'm sure as you're aware, it's the nature of the demographics of a lot of the tenants we have, that they are not, how can I put it, in probably the most digitally enabled sections of society in some cases. I just think it's always important, I'm sure you know it, that they know there's always somebody at the end of the phone if they need somebody, because that really does matter to a lot of the tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take two councillors each time and then come for answers afterwards, if I may, just for speed. Councillor Hayter.
Yeah, very good report, real detail in there. Once again, can't find anything that I want to really ask on that. No, thank you very much. Cheers.
Lovely, thank you. In which case, we'll just go to Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much. Lovely presentation there, Gareth. Good to see you, and you're looking so well. Having been on the inside and now back on the outside of CBH, two areas, one of which is not your responsibility, which is Zone 3 wardens, but community caretakers are. And I'd like to shout out for them for having continued their work throughout the lockdown, above and beyond. I'm sure all of CBH have been working above and beyond, but community caretakers, no option but to work on the front line. So, and those doing emergency repairs, working in people's properties, nothing but praise for the community caretakers and those carrying out repairs to property. And be assured the people of the Saints aren't backward in coming forward, and if there were any complaints, we would have heard about them. I only have one area of concern with regard to Colchester Borough homes, and that is the problem of drug dealing from CBH properties, which is an ongoing problem, which I'm sure you're aware of. Maybe we should have a conversation outside of this meeting about that. But apart from that, congratulations on doing what you have been doing, keeping the show on the road with a wonderful set of people who have worked above and beyond, particularly, as I say, those who have no choice but to work on the front line when working from home is not an option. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. So the point there made by Councillor Dundas about digital solutions and enablement, you might want to comment as well about community caretakers. The drug dealing aspect, Councillor Hogg clearly has some knowledge, but we might need to take care in how we might answer that. And just for sake of regularity, I'll go to Councillor Fox first, who then maybe wish to go to Mr. Mitchell. Councillor Fox.
Yes, so I think Councillor Dundas makes some really good points about the digital approach. I think he rightly says that CBH have always been at that edge, and I think that we do have to be mindful of those customers that aren't as digitally au fait. But I know that CBH and CBC, work really close together in upskilling residents and tenants around digital, and I think quite often we can surprise ourselves with the skills that some people have that we wouldn't necessarily expect them to. In the wider aspect, I think that there are also some progress to be made around the work that CBC and CBH are doing on Project Aurora, which is the new housing management system, and I think that that will also pay dividends for both our organisations as we continue to recover from COVID. But I'm sure that Gareth will be able to answer some more of the detail on those questions too.
Thank you very much indeed. So first of all, on the digital solutions, Councillor Dundas' question, yes, we are acutely aware of the need to maintain a variety of channels for our customers, and I mentioned earlier that actually the core of our work in terms of support and communication has been phone for many of the vulnerable tenant groups for that reason. And as I said, we've had some fantastic support, but we recognise that that was part of our challenge. In some areas of the business, the demographic or the propensity to use technology is a little different than one might imagine. So, for example, on the housing options side of the business, we know our insight data tells us that most of our customers are very happy to do business with us using their smartphones. And actually, when it came to a point where we couldn't meet in person with individuals, we were able to use the really good technology that, as Councillor Fox has said, we share with the council, has really enabled us to work very well to take advantage of digital solutions. But at the same time, the reassurance is that during lockdown, whenever we have needed, with appropriate PPE or distancing in place to be present, we have made sure under those safe arrangements that we are. The demographic is changing, but we do recognise that we need to keep a multi-channel approach. And when we do move and put more digital solutions in place, we do make sure we are stringent in terms of our equality impact assessments and to make sure that we understand the potential impact on customer groups. But to reassure Councillor Dundas, we are already alive to that challenge, and I think we have balanced it well, is my assessment. And then otherwise, thank you for the feedback, Councillor Hogg, on the community caretakers. I know that team have been at the forefront in community right through and have, like many other of their colleagues, done an amazing job. And I mentioned in my presentation the spike in antisocial behaviour. A good deal of that has been drug related. And as I've mentioned to you, the ban on evictions has had clearly has protected renters and protected tenants, and that's a really important thing to do. But you will have probably seen in our media activity that we have applied for and secured a number of closure orders on properties in recent months, and that's possible under the current arrangements. And that essentially is because we have taken our stepped approach of warnings, community protection notices. We've done everything we can to try and encourage people to stop that behaviour, but when we reach that point in partnership with the police, we will not be afraid to use closure orders, and we have done so on a number of occasions in the last few months. Whether that's a partial closure order because the tenant isn't the issue, the people visiting the property is the issue, or where actually the tenant is the challenge and we do need to apply to close the property. So I am content that we have been as robust as we should be in these unprecedented times, but I'd be very glad to pick up that with Councillor Hogg offline. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. No, thank you both. That's kind. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions regarding rough sleepers. It's a good news story to hear that some of them have improved their health and well-being, found steady income, and some of them are even living with family and friends. Just out of sheer nosiness, of that 57, how many have returned to living with family or friends? And then the second question, which is a bit of a negative one, I guess, is with regards to rent collection. So what is in place to support those residents with their arrears, which is probably going to continue growing this year, potentially? I.e., is there a payment holiday? Do they incur a penalty for being in arrears? And if £3,426 is the highest arrears and is now a suspended court order, at what stage do the 18 tenants currently sitting on £2,000 of arrears potentially face a court order?
Good questions, very good. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. You surprised me. I wasn't expecting you to sing. Yes, I have a couple of questions. One is around. It seems like a couple of the big headwinds coming down the line are the end of the furlough scheme, and as Gareth mentioned, the impact that the end of the evictions ban might have on our homeless service. So I'm just wondering, how are we placed to deal with both of those? Yes, and how are we placed to deal with both of those headwinds? And on the everybody in, which I think everyone is very impressed with the work that was done with that. Are we confident that we got everyone in? Is my question. I mean, and how do we think, looking back on that piece of work went?
Again, for regularity, just for comment, I'll go to Councillor Fox, then no doubt he will go to Mr. Mitchell. Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just to cover some of those particular issues, I think Councillor Whitehead makes some really good points about the challenges ahead, and I think that's about, and I think that strikes to the importance of getting our recovery approach right, in terms of being ready to meet some of those challenges. And I know that Gareth and his team and others within the housing strategy team in CBC as well are working really hard. So some of the work that's being done on the next steps in the move on accommodation is vital to securing that we deliver on those people that were under that everybody in scheme. And I think then provides us hopefully with some capacity around how we support those that may be seeking support in the coming months as the as further rent evictions are likely to take place, and we see the impact of people who lose their jobs and their income. I think one of the things that's vital, we have a really good relationship with the ministry and working on these issues, and I think one of the things as we go ahead is that we need that continued support from the ministry. So I think that whilst we can be prepared, central government's got to be prepared to stand behind us as a local authority and the work that we're required to do as well. So I wouldn't want that to go amiss. It's not just about the work that CBC and CBH are doing, it's also about the work that central government needs to do. I think Gareth's already made some really important comments about the partnership working. So some of the partners that we work with on a county-wide basis too are important to that approach, and I hope that that we can get that support from the ministry in the coming months as well. And I know that Gareth will be able to cover some of the more detailed questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair, very much. So Councillor McCarthy's questions, the number of individuals that returned to family and friends was 4. In terms of arrears, I hope I'm not being complacent here, but we have a track record of being able to juggle for the council the balance, which is to collect high levels of rent and have very low numbers of evictions. And if you look at our performance data in recent years, every year that's been the case. And that's because of the really proactive approach we've taken with our financial inclusion team to engagement and support. Support also from council colleagues, from voluntary sector partners, from debt advice charities, CAB, CAP and others. So The first answer is to say is none of that has changed, and that will absolutely continue. We are very clear what the council wishes us to do and the cabinet member wishes us to do. We will engage, we will support, and it's only in quite extreme cases that we feel we need to go, if you like, to that extent. So I can reassure you about that. Actually, the pattern, which is a national pattern, is true for us around arrears during lockdown, is that the major issues are those people who were in significant arrears before the pandemic. So we're very clear as well that if someone has been impacted by COVID-19, our default is support. But actually, the key issues we're facing are not those individuals. They're individuals who are already in significant arrears. So we'll continue to stick to that approach. Indeed, there is some dialogue going on with our various trade bodies and government at the moment around how we try and get ahead of this. Links in a little with Councillor Whitehead's point, the risk around evictions coming at us. And when I look at what government is expecting from landlords around a reasonable approach and support, it tallies exactly with the way we have always worked, frankly. So there will be challenges there when it comes to issues that are unrecoverable, and when it comes to issues such as extreme antisocial behaviour. When we're able to, we will pursue cases. But my reassurance to you and to councillors is that we will only do that where we feel there is no other option. To Councillor Whitehead's questions, in terms of the headwinds, one of the things we've been trying to do, including through lockdown, is make sure that we have sufficient accommodation to meet need that's presenting to us. We have had either zero or very few families in bed and breakfast accommodation pretty much throughout lockdown. We've been really proactive. We've moved people on. We've moved people out of temporary accommodation in the attempt to get us ahead of what may be coming towards us. As Councillor Fox has said, we will need support around some of these challenges that will hit us, but we're we're going to reorganise the way a little that we deliver the service with our team so that we can find ways of improving upon that. But yeah, we are preparing ourselves as best we can for a challenge that we believe will hit us, predominantly, I would say, from the private rented sector. But as I say, I know that the ministry is working to try and secure some kind of agreement that landlords will stick to around that. And your question about everyone in, I hope I won't get the number wrong. I believe there were 4 individuals who either refused to come into accommodation or who actually ended up having to leave the accommodation because of their conduct during lockdown. So not quite everybody, but the vast majority. And we continue now to engage with those individuals to try and bring them back into the fold, if you like. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you both. It's very kind. Let me now go to Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gareth and Councillor Fox, for presenting this evening. Gareth, you described Colchester Borough Homes as your housing management company, but I feel you're being quite modest there, because I feel that Colchester Borough Homes is an integral part of the communities I represent, and not just your tenants, but from a broad range of community services, grants, support that you provide. Colchester Borough Homes really is, for me, the best part of local government. It was under Councillor Bourne and continues to be so under Councillor Fox. I've always felt that the services it provides are absolutely first class and continue to do so. And that's thanks to yourself and your officer team, on the ground at all levels. And I think it's just superb. For just take an example, I had a query about PPE in really the peak of lockdown, and that was dealt with. The tenants' concerns were dealt with absolutely fantastically. The tenant raised concerns about lack of PPE, and that was just dealt with rapidly, superbly, and very with great understanding, because it was quite an emotional time for everybody. And any concerns I've ever had have just been dealt with so rapidly. It really is top notch. So thank you for all the work you and your teams do. And I guess just looking forward, how is the organisation preparing perhaps for another lockdown, local lockdown, or I mean, I'm very much of the opinion, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. I'm quite confident that we can avoid a second wave in the UK, but we have to plan accordingly. So I was just wondering if you want to just raise some of the issues around there. I just want to give one example, by the way, of how great Colchester Borough Homes is. The last post I did on Facebook before my first COVID-related post back in March was asking the community's opinions on the new playground. And Colchester Borough Homes do a lot of work on playgrounds. I have a few in my ward. And just this week, the work has been finished. So throughout lockdown, with all of these challenges that Colchester Borough Homes has faced with its most vulnerable, it was able to go through a consultation, a procurement, and the building of quite a sizable playground actually in West Burgle. And that may not sound like lots, but to my residents, they have been looking forward to this for a long time. And that is just testament to how well the organisation is run and has been able to manage all sorts of pressures throughout. So I'm grateful for everything you do. I think it is superb, the work you do. And fingers crossed we can get through the worst of this period with minimal disruption. But with you guys at the helm, I have full confidence we can do so. But maybe just a bit of detail on the second wave challenges, if possible. Thank you.
It's always good to have first-hand experience and praise. Thank you. Councillor Fox first.
Yes, so before Gareth comes in, I just wanted to say one of the things I've been really mindful of is what would happen if there was a local lockdown. And I have been meeting during lockdown online with other housing portfolio holders in Essex, with county colleagues and others. And one of the questions I asked at that forum was, what are the expectations from the public health team in Essex on us were we to go into lockdown? And I feel that we have a really good dialogue, and both from the housing team and from Gareth's links into county colleagues, but also CBC and Pam Donnelly's relationship with Mike Gogty, who's the Director of Public Health, and others in that team. I think we've learned from what other areas are doing, and I know that Gareth also has links with other ALMOs who've been in areas of lockdown too. So I know that we are quite well prepared, and I think that one of the things we've learned is particularly around things like sheltered accommodation, about particularly protecting those most vulnerable, about what additional measures we'd have to put in place. So for instance, I know that things have begun to relax in terms of the rules that we've put in place around sheltered accommodation. But if we were to go into local lockdown, we would be reintroducing those rules in sheltered accommodation first. And I know that Gareth will have other examples around what we'll be doing were we to have to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair, very much indeed. And thank you, Councillor Barber, for your feedback. It's appreciated enormously, and I'll make sure it's passed on. Just to build on Councillor Fox's comment, actually that area around our sheltered housing tenants really is the one area that we know would be impacted. I know from colleagues in Greater Manchester that that's been the one area that they have had to put restrictions back in place for, to make, given the level of vulnerabilities potentially in that client group. So we have relaxed a lot of those things now. Communal areas are now open again, but I'm sure we would need to move back to restrictions in that area. A lot of the other areas of service, I'm relatively confident that the measures we have now learnt from and put in place would actually serve us relatively well, I suppose, depending on what kind of local lockdown we might have. So if we look at the situation in the northwest of England, larger area lockdown presents some more challenges, but much more localized lockdown, I think we would be able to continue to deliver a lot of what we do, because we have ways of connecting remotely. We have, a really enormous amount of work around risk assessment, making sure that our practice is COVID secure. If we can maintain the confidence of our customer base, our tenants, I think many of our services could continue. So some things would have to stop, few, I think, others could continue. I think the other thing I would say is that clearly, we're a significant organisation in the communities that we serve. So I would think a lot of our responsibility will also be about communication, engagement, trying to ensure that people stick to guidelines. And finally, just in terms of reassurance, in terms of the partnership piece that Councillor Fox mentioned, we did have examples, as we know, is a national issue, where we had individuals discharged from hospital back into their homes who actually subsequently turned out to be COVID positive, and we had to manage that situation. What was excellent in that situation is the way our health colleagues stepped up to put a testing regime in place in our sheltered housing schemes to be able to manage that effectively and give confidence. And so that gives me confidence that if that is an area of our the business that we need to focus on, we would have partners aligned with us to do whatever we need to do to protect our most vulnerable. So I think, but we will see, depending on the nature of what may or may not happen. And as you said, I remain confident, but we have to be prepared. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Gareth very much for his presentation, and Councillor Fox as well for going through some of the presentation as well. I do know that, Gareth, I'm very interested to know, I heard you once say that you, well, I'm probably paraphrasing here, that you want your tenants and leaseholders to live, not merely exist. And I know that's something that you and your team feel very strongly about, because you have over 5,000 tenants and leaseholders looked after by Colchester Borough Homes, that because of the reasons why they are tenants and leaseholders, they are a subset of our most vulnerable people in the borough. So when you say our most vulnerable, you really do mean our most vulnerable. And you're looking after all of them. So I'd like to know what you have learned really for shaping services going forward. Let's not think about COVID now. Let's think about ideal times. Shaping services going forward, whereby those who have disabilities, those who have poor mental health, those who are in and out of poor mental health, and those who have children and families who particularly have not been able to move because there's been a stop on movement during COVID times. And there will have been some families whose banding meant that they are entitled to, and they probably would have bid under choice-based letting scheme and would have been successful in moving. So they're now in overcrowded accommodation for much longer than they had previously thought they were going to be. When do you think you're going to be able to get to a point where people can start moving again or doing mutual exchanges? And what's your prognosis for people living rather than merely existing?
I think that's, thank you. A question directly to Mr. Mitchell, but Councillor Fox managed to comment afterwards. But Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair, very much indeed. So thank you, Councillor Bourne. What we've learnt is a number of things. First is the resilience of some elements of our community, as I know is the experience on the council side, as we made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls to check that those vulnerable individuals were okay, that what we could do to support them. It absolutely told us the real resilience and the capacity within communities, because actually a large proportion of those individuals were already being supported, and that told us that we have to have a focus on supporting, enabling, and not always stepping in, a little in the way that Mandy Jones was talking about earlier. So that has been a huge positive. I think what I've also learnt is the vulnerabilities that become exaggerated under a period like we have had under lockdown, where those things that are already limiting people's life chances and their ability to thrive are exaggerated because, as you said, family and individuals are shut in together and are unable to do those kind of things that they would normally do. And I think the ability of us as providers and community organisations with our partners to be able to hear that, to be able to listen to individuals' challenges, to be able to communicate clearly, and to be able to signpost to support has been absolutely key. I think it's been an important learning for us as a team to remind ourselves back to, I think, Councillor Young's comment earlier on in the meeting of how important contact, interaction and engagement has been. And I believe that will mean we will deliver services differently moving forward to enable us to be more present and engaged, perhaps in ways that we haven't been because of pressures of all the kind of pressures that we've been living under in the housing sector for a little while now. And my prognosis is the housing register is back up and running. We're letting properties. Our contractors are now back up and in place. So we will, because of the preparation work we've been doing during lockdown, I'm relatively confident that we will be able to then move those individuals on fairly quickly and enable them to bid on and occupy the properties that they would have done under lockdown. While recognising that in some of those cases, they'll need additional support, everything from making sure that the home they're moving into is furnished, that they've got any kind of family support that they might need from our partners. So I think we have seen enormous positives and enormous negatives as well in terms of the impact of this last period of time. But I think at a really human level, it has reminded us just how important it is that we stay rooted in the communities that we serve, engaged with partners, and listening and communicating with our customers, and in particular, having insight into what their vulnerabilities means for their lives.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Fox, I'll come to you just after I've asked my question, just to sum up. My question is very brief. I just wondered, in terms of voids, where we were, and as a result of this, do we have any voids? And if we do, what we're doing to turn them around, please. I think probably Mr. Mitchell first for that, then I'll go to Councillor to sum up.
Thank you, Chair. So we have been continuing to deliver voids, re-let properties at a lower level, in part because we needed it to be able to meet emergency accommodation needs during lockdown. That presented a number of challenges. You know, we had to quarantine the properties for 72 hours, only one individual in the house at the time. So although it has been slower, we have continued to manage the voids and re-let properties, and we're now ramping that back up. If you look at our performance numbers, it has taken us it's taken us longer in the last few months to turn those properties around, particularly when you think about the really quick turnaround time we ended up delivering at the end of the last financial year. But we've continued to do it. We're now doing that on a wider basis, as I mentioned to Councillor Bourne's questions, to re-let properties. And so we're on a little bit of catch up, but the process is working again, and we're a little less restricted now in terms of how our working arrangements impact on the turnaround time. So we have a little more flexibility now that our risk assessments are in place and our contractors are back at work.
Lovely. Thank you. Councillor Fox, can I ask you to briefly sum up, please? Thank you.
I'll try my best, Chair. Thank you very much. I think Councillor Bourne's last question really strikes to what she asked in her first question in the previous item. And I think that's, you know, how do we, what makes Colchester different? And I think some of those things that make Colchester different is how we support some of those most vulnerable. So the partnership, I think one of the things that's come, you know, across really strongly this evening is about our partnerships and how we work closely together. And I think that's key between the council and Colchester Borough Homes, but also about those wider partners, both in the public and private sectors, and also the community and voluntary sector too. And I think the other thing that I'm struck quite often about those organisations as well is that whilst we deliver some, you know, really core services really well, I think all of those organisations are also really ambitious as well about achieving more. And so one of the things that the council is ambitious about achieving more is about delivering on new council built homes. And I think that our programme on that going forward is really important in terms of trying to solve some of these longer term issues. But Colchester Borough Homes is ambitious about its delivery and what it wants to achieve. And I think projects that it delivers for us, like the Mercury Theatre, you know, working with our arts partners, is something that you don't see in other places. And I think that organisation, and you're about to hear from the bid as well. And I think that things like the bid and the town deal as well are also ambitious about what they want to achieve for Colchester as well.
Fox, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mitchell, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, I noticed that Colchester Borough Homes are back with us in our January meeting, so I don't think we need to ask for any additional reports until then. We can pick some of this up as part of the key performances. But can I just suggest, again, the recommendation is to thank and commend the portfolio holder, Mr. Mitchell, and all the staff of Colchester Borough Homes for the work they have done. Are we content with that? And if we are, may I have a seconder? Anyone? Councillor Hogg, yes, thank you. In which case, could I just ask, because we can't do it on the nod, as you know, for Mr. Clifford to administer the vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just go through the committee members and they could indicate how they vote, please. Councillor Barber?
For.
Councillor Bentley?
For.
Councillor Bourne?
For.
Councillor Dundas?
For.
Councillor Hayter?
For.
Councillor Hogg?
For.
Councillor McCarthy?
For.
And Councillor Whitehead?
For.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. That's very kind. Thank you indeed, again, Councillor Fox and Mr. Mitchell. You're welcome to stay, but if you don't wish to, I perfectly understand. Right, although who wouldn't want to be listening to part of scrutiny? I do not know, really. Right, okay, let's then move on to item number 12, which is the Amphora recovery programme. Can I thank colleagues for bearing with us through? It's quite a busy but very important scrutiny session tonight. We have Mr. Andrew Tyrrell and Mr. Paul T. Smith, who are going to present to us on Amphora. I don't mind who goes first. I'll leave it entirely up to you, but thank you for both being here.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. If I can start, please, as the client representative for the council, just to introduce the item, because Councillor Higgins is currently on holiday and unavailable for this meeting. You have before you a report which talks about the Amphora company's business recovery plan, economic recovery plan, that aligns with the two reports that you've seen to date, and you'll see similar themes emerging from that. So I'm not going to repeat stuff that's been well discussed on the past two items, with similar things around immediate impacts and so on, but the report sets out for you short, medium and long-term aims in response to recovery for each of the individual companies within the Colchester Commercial Holdings Group. There's a number of projects that have been impacted in the capital projects programme, which is very large, and the companies deliver most of the council's major projects, and we've been working very hard to keep those going. Areas like the sports park only down tools for about 4 weeks, as we had that initial uncertainty, and then the safe operating procedures that we were able to bring in to get construction going again. During the period, we've also had a few contracts that have continued to provide employment opportunities to help the economic recovery, and we've managed to get services back up and running in terms of the weddings that were mentioned earlier, and Paul will come on to that as part of his presentation, no doubt, so I won't steal his thunder any further. There are also some areas that have been of immediate benefit, and we just heard conversations about the most vulnerable residents, and Helpline is one that's been particularly beneficial during this period for tenants and residents that have been cut off from their friends and family. Making sure that they have that support network and reassurance that if something should happen to them, there is someone on hand. And then we've had major impacts on the cancellation of events for the concerts in Castle Park and so on that we've seen so successfully over the past few years. So all of this has had an impact on income. We've tried to set out as much as we can for public transparency, but without giving away anything that commercially would put us at disadvantage against the competition that the companies face that the council doesn't. So it's a slightly different report to some of the others, but hopefully you'll see most of those key themes all aligned between the council's companies. So I will now hand over for the presentation to Paul Smith, who is the Group Commercial Director for Colchester Commercial Holdings and the Amphora subsidiaries.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and good evening to you, Chair, and to the fellow panel members. I'm just going to share with you a presentation. Just there. Can you see that presentation?
No.
No. Is it with Democratic colleagues who can share?
It is, it is. Gillian, could you share that for me, please?
There we go.
Thank you very much. Let me just one moment, because I was expecting to be able to share this myself. Okay, what I'm going to do is just run through a very high level business recovery plan, covering what we have achieved today during the lockdown, what we have looking to do for the remainder of this financial year, and then also go through what we're looking to do for the next couple of years. Because as the private business for the Colchester Borough Council, we're now into our third year, and we have now got the obligations of completing our next 3-year business plans. So what I am just going to cover very slightly, because it does relate back to what we're going to be doing, trying to come out of COVID. So next slide, please. So just as a bit of a background for you, we have the 3 companies. We have the energy company, which is very much aligned to trying to create sustainable energy. And we have progressed very, very well at the Northern Gateway with the 5 boreholes that are going to give a sustainable heat network at Colchester Northern Gateway. And in addition to that, what we're also looking at is a potential for a microgrid. And a microgrid is going to be hopefully delivering electricity that is going to be fundamentally from photovoltaic solar cells, and it may well be a ground-based system that we're looking at. We've also got our homes division, which is going to be selling our properties, our private and affordable housing development, and very pleasingly we have actually continued on our very first housing development at Creffield Road. Then we've then got our trading business, and our trading business is quite a cacophony of activities. Within the trading business, we have our capital project management team, which is predominantly working and delivering the sports park for the council. We've also got our events business, and we'll touch on the events business, so that was affected far greater, but they are really creating the events, running the events, making Colchester a place, a recognised place for these events, very much taking over the placemaking events that were carried on before by the Borough Council. Then we've got our estates team. Our estates team, they manage the council's commercial portfolio and working on the income. And the income clearly fell into quite significant arrears at the beginning of the lockdown. But as we've come out of lockdown, working with the council, those arrears have reduced quite significantly. We then have our helpline service, which was spoken about by Andrew Tyrrell in his opening speech. Helpline is a frontline service and has performed exceptionally well. And we have given great thanks to the helpline team in maintaining without any cessation in any of their services during the lockdown period, continuing to help our customers, continuing to go out safely and in full compliance with full PPE to make sure that our clients did get the assistance that they required under the helpline service, as well as the CCTV, which is part of the helpline control room. And we're also under the trading, you've heard a little bit about LFFN, the local full fibre network. We are one of only 2 towns in the UK that are deploying full digital, which is going to deliver 1 gigabit per second to businesses and to households. Next slide, please. We have just very recently completed our 2nd year of trading activity, and our annual report is now launched on our website, and we did issue the annual report to all councillors for information. So hopefully all of you have seen this annual report. You can see there that we successfully delivered a dividend back to the council of £394,000, which was up in the first year of trading of £286,000. Next slide, please. So during lockdown, our events section was quite dramatically affected, as you can understand, and the majority of our events staff were put on furlough to make benefit of that furlough scheme and to obviously make sure that we've got continuity of employment, which is exactly what that scheme was for. That was for retention, job retention scheme. Helpline continue a frontline service, as I've already mentioned. And Andrew Turrell did mention about the CNG Sports Park. It was very interesting under government guidance that the construction sector was actually one of the first sectors to really be invited to go back to get the economy working and to work safely. And indeed, the sports park with our main contractor, RG Carter, we did actually see, after only 4 weeks of the lockdown, a very compliant recommencement of activities. It was a slow recommencement, as you can understand, with the safe separation of the workforce there. And indeed, we as clients, as a representative on behalf of the council, we were encouraged for the first few weeks not to go to site because that just added an additional burden. But our employer's agent was carrying out their continuing supervision. And obviously now, several weeks on, we're nearly back to normal, but we still have got to have bookings to go to the site. And so now looking at the economy recovery, so looking at what we're going to be doing as we move forward. We are recommencing the events program. We had our very first program last weekend with the pop-up theatre in Castle Park. I'll show you a picture on the next slide on that shortly. Obviously, in supporting the council for the sport and healthy living, obviously we're looking at delivering the sports park, which Mandy Jones mentioned earlier in this evening, that is going to be opened up in January of next year. And that's going to be a park of excellence. And we are looking to also make it a park where there can be more recreational activities there. Basically, sport for all, trying to get more of the residents to actually enjoy the sports park rather than being just a sports park of excellence. We're also an active property developer and construction project manager assisting the local economy. So quite clearly what Amphora is doing is really helping the economy sell under the CBC recovery program. And with regard to the greener economy, we'll be talking a little bit tonight about the sustainability and climate change that we want to have. And the heat network in the Northern Gateway is really going to be quite a pathfinder in this country for the extraction and re-injection of water from between 150 and 200 meters down, extracting that latent heat, converting it, and distributing that around the housing and the businesses that will be in the Northern Gateway. And then, of course, this local full fibre digital communication. Some of the roadworks that are being undertaken right now around Colchester is in fact this work that we are doing on behalf of the council in laying the full fibre network. And that full fibre network is going to be going on a metronet, which is like a electrical circuit to the northern part. And then it's going to be 12 high-speed distribution nodes to the southern part of Colchester. So we are going to be looking to deliver this ultra-fast digital communications of 1 gigabyte per second. And that is not an advertised speed. That is a speed that will be available to all the users that we have. Next slide, please. So our key deliverables for the remainder of this year, clearly complete the sports park and get that open and assist the council. Move forward and finalize the tender works for the energy centre for our heat network and get the construction started on there this year. We want to finalise the planning consent, and we're still in negotiations with Highway to get that approval so that we can take that to committee in the hopefully October, November of this year. And then, of course, we're going to see in this current financial year the first house sale from Amphora Homes at Creffield Road. Next slide, please. Continuing that, the events. So that little small picture that you can see there, that is a picture of our first event that occurred at the Pop-Up Pictures. And you can see the social separation and the bubbles that were being created there. We want to improve the commercial and retail rental income on behalf of the council. We've heard tonight about the budget gap. We've heard the importance of income, and our estates team, that is within the trading business, has worked very, very well and very sensitively in compliance or in association with the council, with the local businesses, to try to get back in those rent arrears that have occurred during the lockdown period. We are hoping to complete the majority of the Metronet in this current financial year, and looking at the high-speed nodes going in the latter part of next year. But that's really going to be connecting up now. So we are connecting some businesses in the town centre. So we're now seeing this growing graph of income coming through from the digital deployment that we have undertaken. And then, of course, looking at the community, looking at the community centres, making sure that we work with the council and utilise those funding streams that do come through as we help to actually deliver those local community facilities. Next slide, please. So looking at beyond April 2021 and looking at what the companies want to do and how they should be driving forward to actually create something that is more than what we are doing now. Clearly, our energy company will be looking to expand and maximize the heat network that we have. So looking at what else can we actually utilize with regard to all the activity that we have on the Colchester Northern Gateway. There has been some discussions earlier about commercial space. Now, the master plan for the Colchester Northern Gateway does have 45,100 square meters of commercial space in there. And we are thinking about what is the best use for that. You've spoken about drop-in office spaces, and certainly formerly from London, looking at the WeWorks process, looking at that flexible working spaces. There is a perception that that sort of activity will move forward. Certainly some of the larger organizations do want to see more activity back in offices. They're missing the informal get-togethers, the informal transference of information, that business knowledge. So they're trying to get, as I heard earlier, a hybrid version of working flexibly at home and then also going to your place of work. And certainly I've got several colleagues that have now done that, not under their own request, but actually being guided by their employer as being a preferential way to work. And looking at the microgrid, which I mentioned earlier, certainly wanting to see if we can expand that to some of the other assets that the council has. And we are aware of some deep boreholes that we could look at elsewhere in the town and look to see if we could actually do some further extraction and re-injection, very similar to the network that we have at the Northern Gateway. Next slide, please. Looking at Amphora Homes, clearly we want to see the commencement and the first occupations at Colchester Northern Gateway, both on the affordable housing and also on the private house sales. Creffield Road will be finished. We've got the phase 2 housing sites to be reviewed, identified and moved forward. And then of course all the garage sites which are 100% affordable properties, and really moving those forward. And then looking at what else can we be developing, and looking at how can we actually grow the housing company. Because certainly in the long term, there needs to really be the ability to drive these businesses forward, to still maintain support for the council, but then to also see if they can bring in additional money from external third parties. Because we must remember that everything that the Amphora business does, the Amphora group does, 100% of that is returned to the council to assist them to financially support their services. Next slide, please. Then we have the trading company. So I've mentioned the excellent work that our estate services have done. And quite clearly, we have a very high quality professional team there that could and should grow to provide services to other parties on a purely, such as like an F&M service, facilities management. Really want to make sure that we continue to integrate economic and social sustainability with growth. If you look at Colchester Northern Gateway has got to be a sustainable urban extension to the North Colchester, and the importance of making sure that economic and social sustainability is always integral in what we do as we move forward on our development is hugely important. The events is a service that we could actually provide from a management service to other parties, but certainly we've got to make sure in the longer term that we do grow that business, because that business is fundamentally for years 1 and 2 has been self-funding and generating the profit that has made the ability for the set-up costs of the energy business and the homes business. You might remember from the Enterprise Awards that Colchester Borough Council was listed as an entrepreneurial council by the way it had set up its private company. Quite a lot of local authorities just set up a development company, spend the first 3 years seeing a cost absorption because they're setting up. But the way that Amphora was set up, there was trading activity straight away with the helpline service and with the events business. And clearly, that is a fantastic model, and we need to make sure that we maximize that. Just talking about events, because the question came up, Councillor Bentley, yes, we are advertising the weddings, and we have been continuing to progress the community weddings, where there was only the 5 attendees permissible. Now that we've got the 30 guests that are permissible, we're now progressing on those larger weddings. And indeed, last week there was a wedding in the chapel in the top of the castle. So we are very much moving forward on those weddings. The helpline services is a very good service because it really does actually reduce the draw or the call on the NHS service. And we really need to look at extending that service. We could extend it geographically, but that would require basically infrastructure resources to go in there. So we're going to just be very cautious and not overstretch yourself, because the helpline service is the personal service. And if you fail and don't deliver that personal service, then the service reputation will falter. So as much as we want to grow the helpline service, we will be cautious and we'll make sure that we can absolutely meet the expectations of our customers. The LFFN digital network, that has got the potential to be a significant annual income generator to CBC. On the back of the DCMS funding, which is forward funding basically the Metronet, and then we have got VX Fibre, which has been well reported on, coming on and doing the connections to the front of the properties, with then a third party providing the physical connection to the businesses and to the residents. And you will see that income grow exponentially over the next 3 to 5 years. And then when you think about all the great work that we have done in our capital projects management, for the council. We have got a very good dedicated core of staff, which I really do see could actually again extend their activities to try to earn some external fee earning. Next slide, please. So, in summary, what Amphora is doing to assist the economic recovery within Colchester is supporting a greener economy with its sustainable energy. It is looking to deploy the digital technology ability for Colchester, for its businesses. This will make Colchester more attractive because of our digital technology and connection, where we have a dedicated line going down from the A12 to Telehouse in London that gives us this ultra fast 1 gigabit per second is a huge, huge benefit. Next slide, please. To deliver the events program for a vibrant Colchester, create new business opportunities, develop the Colchester Northern Gateway as a truly sustainable urban extension to Colchester, and really start to see the benefits of all the hard work that has been undertaken by many people, not only with Amphora, but within all the parts of CBC and CBH. Next slide, please. So thank you very much, Chair. That concludes this very brief overview, and I'll return back to yourself, Chair. Thank you.
Very grateful. Thank you, Mr. Smith. That's extremely kind. Right, let me go to councillors on the panel to ask any questions. I'm going to start with Councillor Hogg, if you have anything.
No question, Chairman. Just thank you for the presentation. Very full.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Nothing from me either, Chair. Just grateful for the presentation. Always impressed with what Amphora Trading does. Oh, Amphora does rather. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, thank you for the presentation. I mean, very pleased to see that seems to be a proactive approach about using our position as a potential investor and spender locally to try and help our local economy. I think that's very important. One of the big tragedies of the last 10 years was that didn't happen nationally, I think. But we are just, humble local authority. Difficult for us, I guess. I'm wondering, we've had a hit on the revenue side, but how is a lot of what we do is a lot of what Amphora does is around bigger capital projects. How is the funding side for that being affected by recent events? Is that become more difficult?
Just for your answer to that, I'll take another councillor. We've got two together, if that's okay. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. No, I actually don't have any questions. Thank you. Just thank you for the report, Paul.
Thank you. Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul, for the report. It's good to have Amphora to come in so much detail and to provide us some detail before the meeting as well. Can I just ask about helpline? In the paper, you say that helpline's model is primarily monitoring and response, but could also be, and there are 4 bullet points. Is there anything stopping you from progressing any of those 4 bullet points?
Right, so maybe take those 2 questions together, please, Mr. Smith.
Yes, I'm just now quickly trying to rush through to see in the report. Can you just point me to the number of the bullet points in the report, Councillor Bourne?
It's in the appendix on page 3.
Do you want a few more minutes to look at that, Mr. Smith, and I can go to another councillor? Would you?
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Fine, carry on them.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Bourne. If I take the first question first, which was funding on the capital projects, I think I reported to the Governance and Audit Committee that the reduction in the forecast dividend for this current year, the year 3, that was a result of COVID. It was an immediate result of our business recovery plan assessment. So literally within the first week of COVID, we were looking at what can we actually do, how can we deliver, what's the expectation, looking at everything. We've estimated that we will be losing £800,000 income just purely in our events. And when you then look at the associated cost savings and the furlough cost, that then meant that our dividend went down from 528 down to 226. So that was an effect that we were managing within our business. With regard to the capital funding projects, obviously we act as the project manager, the project management on behalf of the council, who technically are our client. Now, there has been no issues with regard to the funding to pay these. We are extremely well advanced on the sports park. As you can imagine, if we're going to be opening in January, we're looking to have completion of the site from a construction point of view by November. So that is very much ongoing. We have commenced the first phase 1 of what is called the walk. It used to be called the boulevard, but it's now the walk on the Colchester Northern Gateway Southern site. And again, that is being funded by the council. And this is very much, this is Colchester Borough Council with that ability to actually demonstrate and drive forward this economic recovery. So rather than deferring it, rather than let's defer this for 3 to 6 months, it's no, let's get back out there. Let's actually really try to show that here is the council, it is pushing forward and moving these projects forward. And indeed, Homes England, who have put £5.5 million worth of funding into the Colchester Northern Gateway, are very, very appreciative that we are moving forward. We are still carrying out all the infrastructure work. And indeed, their senior management are coming out 2 weeks' time to actually see boots on the ground exactly what we are doing, because they are quite impressed that we're carrying on and moving this forward. With regard to helpline,
sorry, Chair, can I just expand on that answer while Paul's just preparing for the second question?
Yes.
So in response to Councillor Whitehead's question, I think the important thing to stress is there's 2 points really. One is some of our housing projects are HRA funded and Amphora helping us deliver those. And for public benefit, there's 2 different council funds. There's the general fund, which is as it says, the general fund. Then there's a ring-fenced housing account that can't be used for anything other than housing. So that one is allowing us to progress with some of the council's housing schemes that Amphora are helping with. But then directly in response to your question about the difference between capital and revenue, one important thing is that the council's borrowing capabilities for capital investments is different to revenue. You can't borrow so easily for revenue, and that's a real key point. And the importance of that capital program is that we're investing in capital programs that then deliver returns to us to increase revenue, because revenue is the real difficult thing to say. So I think I just wanted to make that point on as a council officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr.
Thank you, Andrew. So going back to your question, Councillor Bourne, with regard to the helpline and the 4 bullet points there, the only thing that we have to overcome is currently the helpline system is analog, it needs to be digital. We are really trying to move forward with much better technical awareness, and the technology on the digital systems do give us the ability to really monitor and deal with other aspects of the service that we could offer. And indeed, in association with Pam Donnelly, we are looking at some other opportunities where we can use the control center of helpline to actually expand the offering and the service from helpline. So thinking of helpline more as a control center for monitoring that can then activate additional services that we can offer. And certainly some of the services that we've highlighted there is just a snapshot of what we're looking to do in the future.
Thank you. Right, let's move then on to Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting as always. I've got two brief questions. One, on page 91, it summarises the understandable reduction in dividend, which obviously affect the CBC bottom line. But then on page 93, it talks about changes in the service level agreement, because obviously, as I understand it, the financial relationship between CBC and Amphora is a little bit more complicated than one just does things and then pays a dividend, because Amphora is also a customer of CBC's, and that you buy back office facilities and things and hire venues and things. So just wonder if you could clarify what the actual bottom line effect is to CBC in terms of drop, whether it is that drop of the dividend, or whether there are other effects in reduction of the service level purchases and that. And also in paragraph 4.24, we talk about the sports facilities, which I know is not all directly Amphora. For obvious reasons, the capacities are currently restricted. They're open with currently restricted capacities. Is it possible in the current situation for them to run at break even or profit, or do we have to accept that they inevitably run at a loss at the moment? And equally with the Northern Gateway Sports Park, if the current restrictions are still in place when that opens and the capacity is affected there, do we think we'll be able to run that at profitable level or break even when it opens, or do we have to accept that until the restrictions go, it'll probably run at a small loss? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. The SLAs, so the £226,000, that is a dividend forecast that we determined, we being Amphora, the Board of Directors of CCHL, and in association with senior officers and leadership of CBC. It also went to G&A and then subsequently approved at Cabinet. Now, the £226,000 is our forecast based on the effect of our events business, and that includes all costs that we have and that we know of. So that's all the SLA costs. So in reference to the additional venue costs of the £100,000 for looking at memoirs, we've included that. So that is hopefully the worst position, and it can only actually improve from that. And indeed, if there is not a second local lockdown and the events program can start to move forward, we've already started the outdoor events. We are looking at the indoor events, and we're working with promoters. We're trying to assess, could some compliant events occur inside Charter Hall? So we could potentially see ourselves actually generating event activity, generating trading that is more than we speculated and assessed when we did our revised budget. So I hope that answers the question on the SLA. If it doesn't, then I'll give you some more information. With regard to sports and leisure, so yes, Amphora management, namely under Alistair Wilson, we provide strategic guidance and some operational management to the sports and leisure, namely Colchester Leisure World. Colchester Leisure World has operated at profit levels, but clearly the effect of the roadworks at the bottom of Ipswich Road, the elongated time it's taken for those roundabouts to be done, that had quite a dramatic effect, as we all know, on Colchester Leisure World numbers of footfall going through the turnstiles. So that's what made that into a cost to the council. We do hope that when the roadworks are finished and that the real effects of COVID are over, that the Leisure World will return to that happier place. It is interesting to note that there is a difference. My son is a personal trainer and he works at a different gym in a different town. And his gym, the clientele group there, they're all returning and they're happy to return and they want to return. They're actually tired of working out at home. What we've noticed at Colchester Leisure World is that quite a lot of the membership have used the opportunity to pause their membership because they're not enjoying the COVID compliance, and they basically just want to pause their membership and let that pass and return within a couple of months. New memberships are occurring, but they're not occurring in the numbers that you would anticipate going there. So Colchester Leisure World, two aspects, COVID and the roadworks affecting it adversely. I expect that to return back, and I would expect that to be in profit. The same thing will happen to the sports park. The sports park is going to be a brand new cycling of excellence. We've got the Rugby Football Club up there. We've got Councillor Coleman with Sigma Trust wanting to go up there, rent classrooms, manage the academy, have the sports training up there. We've got refreshment concessions that we want to move forward there. But you're quite correct in your question, is that if we still have these reductions, these costs, if we still have the COVID restrictions, the sports park will be adversely affected by that, because sports and leisure, it is a very close proximity activity that is undertaken. And when I speak to Carl O'Brien, the chairman of the Rugby Football Club, what they're having to do their training, it's amazing that they are actually doing some training now, but you can just see that that's going to be affected for many months. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, I think so. I think my point with Leisure World was that at the moment, however much demand there is, it is physically restricted. You have to book swimming, for example, and if it's full, you can't get your slot. So the report refers to the fact that that's the case. So if, for example, it can only currently accommodate 50% it normally could, it may well be that demand is outstripping supply, if you like. So with it at 50% or 40%, whatever the figure is it physically possible for it to break even, or do we have to accept that that's impossible, whatever other things, whatever the demand is?
Due to the operating costs, and we are managing the staff resources very carefully there. The answer to that question is I do not see it operating at a break even under the current restrictions.
Okay, Councillor Hayter, any questions?
No questions. Just thank you for the presentation there.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to echo that thanks as well. And perhaps I could just recommend we have the same thanks to the two officers who presented and for their reports. Amphora Homes is not on our agenda again. And therefore, when we go through the work programme, which we won't do tonight, to be pleased to hear, but when we meet up, we will do, and perhaps we can invite them back again to do perhaps a quarter report of where we think we're going to go and where we actually end up, if that's okay. But if people are happy that we have the same recommendation to thank the two officers for their time and presentation, may I have a seconder or an alternative? Thank you, Councillor Bourne, second. I'm afraid we have to go through the vote, and therefore I'll ask Mr. Clifford to administer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Barber?
For.
Councillor Bentley?
For.
Councillor Bourne?
For.
Councillor Dundas?
For.
Councillor Hayter?
For.
Councillor Hogg?
For.
Councillor McCarthy?
For.
And Councillor Whitehead?
For.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind. Right. Thank you both, Mr. Smith and Mr. Tyrrell as well. That's very kind of you. Thank you. I'm very grateful. Right. We move on to our final report. And I just want to say to our colleagues from the bid, sorry to keep you waiting. You're last but not least, I assure you. Not rush this. We'll take as long as it takes. My colleagues are asking questions to ask the question as pithily as you can. Pithily? It's a word now. Right. Can I first of all invite Mr. Blaxall and then Mr. Good to present from the Colchester bid, whichever order you wish. But thank you.
Well, if I may, Simon, I'll just quickly do an introduction, and then Sam will give you the meat and the bones that are really much more important. But as chair, I just want to say a few introductory words, and some of this you'll probably know, but I think, first of all, I've been very impressed, again, how much there is going on in Colchester. And I'll just say, most citizens in Colchester wouldn't have a clue. And that's one of my big points I just want to make in this introduction, you're probably aware the bid is very town centric. It's the levy payers all within a fairly short distance of the town centre. And because of that, an awful lot of it is retail based. You'll equally be aware that pre-COVID, retail stores were under huge pressure, whether it's online or out of town centres. They were already under pressure, and then you lay COVID on top of that. And I think what it's done, it exaggerated the need for Colchester to reinvent itself. And what I mean by that is it can't just be a shopping centre, it has to be a social experience. And that can be anything from art to cafes, culture, and I'll throw in hairdressers, because I read just post the lockdown, hairdressers don't hang around in out of town centres. They're only in town centres, and that in itself is a social experience. And indeed, it may be lots of shops get converted back to houses and flats, and that's not a bad thing because you have people living in towns again. Sadly, it is absolutely the case that a number of businesses won't survive and unemployment will be going up. We hear it every day, and retail is at the centre of quite a bit of that. What I am pleased to say, though, is that the bid has been working closely with the council. Mandy Jones has been running meetings, which has included Colby and ourselves. Thank you very much to the council. Officers have moved at great speed. There's been some really good things done to support businesses, and I like to think in return the bid has been able to help, giving some real life stories of what's going on the ground level, and I think the council have responded to that really, really well, which has been fantastic, and the advice coming from Colby is an actual example of that. The town fund has been referenced a couple of times, and it should be said, the actual funds the bid have got are very limited. We're not talking much more than £500,000 here. So I actually see the bid as a facilitator, and Sam will talk you through some of the things we're doing. For Colchester to succeed, we have to have a strategy that encompasses the council in terms of Colchester and the county council, as well as other bodies. And I believe the town fund will be a platform, and hopefully will continue to be a platform for that. I've personally been really, really encouraged by a number of big hitters, if I put it that way, the university, the CELEP and others, health organisations being represented on the board, and all actually having a common vision, and which is really, really encouraging. The bid itself represents roughly 400 businesses. We're never going to have one voice, but we're looking as best we can to get one voice for you, because I don't know how you guys or the council communicate with, actually there are 800 odd businesses because there are 400 that don't pay the levy. So our mission, as I see it, is to work with you to get a vision for the town 15, 20, 25 years ahead, which unites businesses, the county council and the borough. And we must establish common ground. Will be bumps in the road, but we've got to keep looking at that big picture. And in my view, the COVID enables us to be much more bold than we possibly would otherwise have been. And I just add again, or emphasise again, we've been working closely with the borough. There's some great work going on. As I say, most Colchester citizens wouldn't have a clue what's going on. So our mission is to help you communicate what is going on. And I'm not just talking to businesses, but actually to the public at large. Because if we don't communicate, actually what happens is, as you'll know this better than I, people make it up. And you will have a million critics, and you deal with the critics. It's a hell of a lot more difficult if we communicate properly in the first place. So we have to succeed. What would Britain be like without towns? There would be no culture. And somebody mentioned mental health earlier. I go every Saturday morning to a cafe, and I tell you, I come away feeling better every Saturday morning simply through having a coffee and having a chat with people. And that's part of the social experience that Colchester has to develop. Enough from me. Sam.
Thank you very much, Simon. Richard, would you mind putting the presentation, or do you need me to share the screen?
Just there.
Hey, there we go. Just to introduce myself, so my name's Sam Good. I'm the manager of the Town Centre Business Improvement District. So my responsibility is to run the day-to-day operations and feed into the bid board and advisory group as necessary. So we're now in our second year, soon to start our third year of a 5-year term before we go back to a reballot. And today I'm just going to run you through how the bid's handled COVID recovery
and where we are at this current moment moving forward as well. So next page. So just to date, here's a real slingshot highlight of what we've been up to in our first 2 years. So monthly, we're delivering over 480 hours of street ambassador patrols through the town centre, which has been had a phenomenal impact on the business town centre. We're now building a lot of marketing, promotion, presence online just to promote the town centre in the best possible way, and that includes our In Colchester brand that we launched. In the 2 years, we've registered over 4,000 business interactions. That's one-to-one interactions with businesses to pop in, see how they're getting on, and make sure that we're collating data that we can feed back, as Simon mentioned, to the council, be that county and borough. We're also grateful that we've been able to take part in a multitude of groups now. So we're members of the Town Centre Action Plan, the Bus Blueprint, able to attend meetings like this for Scrutiny, where the bid's able to achieve one of its key objectives, which is being a voice for businesses, which hasn't actually existed before. We're able to collect the information from over 400 businesses, or probably more, and collate that into one view where possible. Obviously, hopefully you've seen our flowers around the town. That's been one of our bigger projects. So we've got over 100 planters around the town, which we plant 12 months a year, and amongst other things, but I won't bore you to death with a lot. I'm sure you're aware of what we've been up to. One key thing in there is that we've now developed a distinct and innovative vision for our indie route, so independent route in the town centre, which we're soon to go live on, and I'll go into a bit more detail on that in a minute. So next page. So COVID-19. So March the 23rd hit, we went into lockdown for the town centre, to what will be for generations the biggest catastrophe to hit our town centre businesses. And I don't think I would have ever imagined that we'd be in this position coming out of it, and I'm incredibly proud to say, I'm incredibly proud about how our businesses handled lockdown and have got through. As Simon mentioned, there are casualties. There have already been casualties, and I think October, November, December will demonstrate the true reading of that. But just as a bit of an overview of what we were up to through lockdown. So we had our vision for year 2, ripped it up and rebuilt a whole new plan, to put it quite bluntly. So looking at that, we launched the town centre task force, so COVID-19 recovery task force that brought together the council, Mercury Theatre, First Sight, shopping centres, you name it. Every key stakeholder, including Essex Police, came together as one and made sure that every decision we made was as a town centre and it wasn't as individuals making their own plans. And that was, well, I hope others agreed, really, really effective. We handed out over 1,000 floor vinyls free of charge to all businesses in the town centre. We handed out over 750 of our recovery packs, which was a really brief overview of how businesses should be reopening, from something so small as Legionella tests, for units that have been vacant for so long. Hopefully you've seen our hand sanitizer stations that we placed around the town, placed in every single council car park, every bus stop, and many other locations as well, just to bring confidence to people as they come into town that it's a safe place to come. We reviewed, as part of the task force, the pinch points, of what we call the pinch points in the town where social distancing is going to be more of a challenge. And that included Eld Lane, St Nick's Passage, Bank Passage, amongst many others, where we installed floor stencils for a keep left messaging to try and help. In the first month, we saw about an 80% adherence to that. Slowly and sadly, that has gone the negative route on people following that, but we're trying to review and put further installations as we can. Amongst many other things, we also launched a resource portal that brought together 5 local suppliers, so Colchester Borough suppliers, that offer discounted rates just for our businesses on PPE, reopening resources, you name it, all of that, which was amazing, because again, going back to what Mandy mentioned earlier, we were able to procure from within the borough, which is one of our key procurement policies. We launched a campaign called Welcome Back Colchester, which included a video which had nearly 6,000 views, and was shared across the borough, which we're really proud of. Hopefully you've seen it. We actually done a one-to-one call with every single independent business on our books, just to pop in, say hello and see how they're getting on, which the businesses, believe it or not, Really appreciated, probably more than ever. A phone call just to help and see where they could rant most of the time, and we could hopefully solve and liaise with the amazing business rates team, who were phenomenal in getting the grants out, and we're still getting some of the discretionary grants out now. And just to finish off, we had a 50,000 leaflet drop to residents in the borough to tell them why they should be returned to Colchester and what installations we've been putting on to bring confidence. So just to summarise on that, every single thing that we've done through COVID-19 lockdown was about confidence and bringing confidence back to people to come back into the town centre. We're nowhere near bringing that to what we should be, and that's purely down to confidence and uncertainty in COVID still, but we're getting there. Currently, we're looking at about 80% return like for like on footfall, which is far higher than we ever expected. And sale conversion is the highest it's probably ever been in the town centre. So where people are coming in, they're coming in to spend money. They're not coming to dawdle. They're not coming to wander around. They're coming in to spend money. And that's a really positive note to take from that. Next page. So just until the rest of the year, we're still a part of the Monster Safari, which we've been chosen as one of 100 locations nationally to take part of, which is a really great project. And just to note, also through COVID-19 lockdown, as soon as we went into lockdown on March the 23rd, we assigned a local company, Z Security, a contract from the 6th of April to patrol the town centre between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. every night to monitor all of our units, as they were all now vacant. And through that whole time period between the 6th of April and the end of June, we had 0 attempted break-ins or break-ins into our levy payer businesses, which demonstrated a real return of investment on that. In comparison to previous to that, we saw a big steep increase on attempted break-ins and break-ins. Obviously, people were in lockdown, but one thing to take away from that, we did see a hell of a lot of incidents still in the town, a lot of people still around in the town, and a lot of proactive deterrence to people possibly breaking in as well. Next page. So just as an overview of what we base our decisions on as a bid. So we, on our business plan, made the promise to enhance the Colchester Town Centre as a place where people want to shop, live and work and relax by promoting high quality, diverse, welcoming environment, which is customer focused and investment friendly. Year one, we focused on building foundations. And hopefully you all remember when I presented last time, it was all about getting the basics right and building foundations from there, because there's no point us screaming from the rooftops about how much we love the town centre for people to turn up and there is sadly a homeless person right at their feet, or there is litter everywhere, or there's graffiti everywhere. That's not going to help. Next, we moved on to making Colchester Town Centre the best place to work, live and visit. If you're not going to be ambitious, then we may as well not progress. Next. So year three, which starts on October the 1st, we have reviewed where we're at, and we've reset our objectives for year three based on 3 points, which are revive, strive and thrive. So revive people's confidence in coming to the town centre. Number one, if we can't do that, then we're extremely restricted into growth. Strive to be a destination that businesses can succeed in, working with Colby and the council to ensure that every possible resource is available for our businesses, to make sure that essentially they are still operating where possible, and thrive to be the best destination in the region for visitors, workers and residents. If we didn't believe that Colchester Town Centre could be that, then we wouldn't be putting it, and we thoroughly believe that we have the potential to be that moving forward. So just going back to our, so March 23rd, we structured a 4-stage framework for COVID, which was crisis, so helping the businesses in that moment. What do they need from us? How can we help them right in that moment of panic where they've gone into lockdown and they don't know what to do? Moving on to pre-recovery, where we built our recovery plan, which was part of the task force, and reflecting and learning on what we know and what to do. Then moving into recovery, which we're still in, and we probably will still be in for sort of the next year now, as that's slightly extended with local lockdowns. And then we'll eventually move into transformation to look at more long-term planning. From crisis to recovery, everything has been extremely short-term. which sadly isn't my preferred route, but it's just the way that we have to work. We have to be reactive and making sure that we're doing all we can to help businesses. Next page. So I think I always use this in my presentations. I find it really, really interesting, and I like evidence. So I'm going to bore you to death with a couple of statistics. So there was a high street survey done during COVID where 56 respondents marked going out to a restaurant as what they miss most. And the Help Out to Eat Out campaign has been phenomenal for the hospitality sector in the town centre. We're seeing the majority of the restaurants fully booked from Monday to Wednesday every week. And I might send a little note to Rishi Sunak to beg him to continue it, because it's been amazing, to be quite direct. 60 respondents strongly agree that they'll use more contactless payments, to be expected. But this is one that we've carried forward in conversations with the council. 72% stated an increase in cleaning, whilst combined all respondents want more outdoor seating and more greening. It's obvious if you do the calculations, more people will want to spend less time in shops, but more time outside. So public realm space, cafe culture, as the council officers have been working amazingly on. And this is what we're basing our decisions on, of what consumers want. We currently have a consumer survey out at the moment. We're at about 500 response at the moment, and we're asking the residents what they want, because if we don't do that, then what is the point of us trying to attract them in if we don't know what they want? Next page. So this is a brief timeline of where we're at. I mean, you all know the dates of when things opened and when we go, but I just thought I'd sort of overview that. Next. So social distancing, we were going day by day with the government changing left, right, centre, what we're doing, what we're not doing. So what we made sure is that if this was the line that the government wanted us to be at, as a town centre, we had to be here. And we instructed all of our businesses to be OTT on everything that they were going to do. As soon as people walked in the door, there should be a hand sanitizer. The COVID secure certificate should be right in the face of the customer to demonstrate that that's their advertising, that they're a safe place. All the businesses, all the staff to have masks, people to know what they're going to do and not to be told no, no, no all the time. So next page. So we obviously placed the installations around the town, and we worked with Essex Highways closely on this to make sure that what we done was in line with their regulations. Next page. And this included routes such as Eld Lane, Bank Passage, Pelham's Lane, etc. Next page. As you can see, a couple of routes here that we are seeing people follow as well. Yep, next page, and again, and one more. So these are the routes hopefully you've seen around the town. They're starting to fade from the downpours, but we're hopefully getting them reinstalled, just to reiterate, because the job isn't finished. It's nowhere near finished. And we're looking to reinstate these to make sure that they're very clear for people visiting the town. Next. So again, as I mentioned, the bid recovery and reopening pack was amazing, and the businesses really appreciated that. It was a one-stop shop for everything they needed to know from the moment they walked back to their business, what they needed to do to reopen safely and adhere to the COVID secure regulations. Alongside that, we worked really closely with the licensing team and Dave and Councillor King on the pavement licence, which we are extremely grateful for the hard work and the speed that we're able to turn, or that they were able to turn that around. And hopefully we'll see a lot of businesses now open up to the outside of their premises as well. Next. Here's the business resource portal that I was mentioning, that we were procuring local supplies for products. You wouldn't believe how hard it was to get Perspex screens, but our local supplies came through and they were phenomenal. Next. Again, the recovery pack. Next. And these were the floor finders, which you've hopefully seen. These adhered to Essex Highways guidance. There were the correct non-slip laminate vinyls, and they were handed out to over 700 businesses in the town. Over 1,000 handed out free of charge that we gave out, and it's really helped to try and align the whole town centre as one messaging. Which we're really, really proud of, and we've still got some left. So if you know any businesses, they're more than welcome to get some. Next. This was actually a really big project, and when we were doing the research into consumers prior to reopening, the majority were really freaking out about queuing. It's a British thing. People really hate queuing or love queuing or expect queuing. So we worked with the task force, which included Essex Police, counter-terrorism, licensing, you name it, to put together a one-stop shop, a queuing brief to tell every business how their queue has to be. It sounds really boring and lame, but it worked. And all the businesses really appreciated knowing where their queue had to go and what they had to do. And we were seeing a real alignment between businesses talking to their neighbours and engaging and making sure that just because their business was really busy, that didn't then stop people from going in the next. And people had confidence as they were walking through town. They were seeing organised queues. They weren't sprawled across the road, and just trying to align to that big message of confidence. Next. You can put a couple of clicks through. I think this is going to go into each individual. There we go. So this is the town centre, as you can see. So this is where all the hand sanitizer locations are in the town, all of the dots, which, you know, we are still seeing they're used. So all of the bus stops on Head Street and High Street have got them, and all the car parks, council car parks, got hand sanitizers. They're being drained every week. We've had to buy a whole new batch of hand sanitizers to refill. So as long as the need's there, we'll keep filling that up. And we've had a lot of positive comments online as well for people who really appreciate that. Next. And again, there you go. So that, so we identified that our hospitality sector was going to get hit the hardest out of all. And we're still seeing that. And the Help Out to Eat Out has definitely helped in that aspect. So we worked with a company called Round, which is a one-stop shop app where people, we could target workers in the town centre to order their lunch and pick up to avoid queues, but also encourage customers to order from tables to try and speed that service and help with social distancing as well. So that's now live and launched. Next. We're about to launch our big lunch campaign, which we're really excited about. So one thing that we have immense amounts of in the town centre is professional services and people who work in the professional services sector. So the bid next month will be funding over 300 meals for office workers in the town centre to come and try new eateries across the town centre. So they'll go in, we'll book tables for, say, Hiscox, table of 10, in a new location that is unlikely they've ever been to before to try new places. So it's driving footfall into new businesses and driving that and getting new exciting ideas into people's heads. But it's also encouraging the workers in the town centre to try and increase their spend in the town instead of bringing that boring old packed lunch into the town. So that's really exciting. We're looking forward to launch that, and we're going to go bigger and bolder next year as well, and hopefully fund a lot more free meals as well. Next. Again, just a leaflet drop, and that is a very speedy presentation on what we're up at the moment. And I hope it gave you sort of an outline of where we're at and what we're doing. There's a lot more to go into about what we've been doing for the last 2 years and what we've got planned next year. One thing that I did mention earlier on is that we now have our vision that we tendered through HAP projects, which is about to go live to our independent businesses. The Councillor King and colleagues have seen this vision, and we're hoping that this can form some real investment into the next 5 to 10 years or potentially further. So thank you very much for having me today. If you've got any questions, please feel free to fire them my way, and hopefully I can answer them.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you. I'm very grateful. I'm also conscious it's 20 to 10, but we must give this a fair hearing. But we're still trying to beat the Councillor King bongs if we can at 10. So let me go, making sure everyone has a fair crack of the whip in terms of asking questions. So Councillor Whitehead first, if I may come to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation and for hanging on for us till this late hour. A couple of small questions. One is interesting, actually, the 80% footfall. It's a higher figure than you might imagine, even by sort of strolling around the town. So that's quite impressive. And high sales conversion, you said. Do we know what the percentage sales conversion is of what we would expect it to be at this time? So is it even better than the 80% of the footfall?
Yeah. So sales conversion varies between obviously all specific smaller, larger locations. In some locations, we're seeing a sale conversion of increase of over 150%. In some, I mean, it really is phenomenal. Partly down to people having to queue. That, you know, people aren't going to queue if they're not going to spend. So your conversion rate is going to be slightly inflated because of that. But it's actually record breaking in a lot of our national stores. So a lot of the nationals are actually seeing the highest conversion rate they've ever seen, but also regionally as well. Without sort of going into detail on some of our national specific, around 3 or 4 of our larger national retailers in the town are performing best in region, let alone up there nationally as well. So that's really positive. When I say 80%, we're seeing that in some locations, the majority of locations, but not all. We are seeing some of the locations that are seeing around 60%, but the sale conversion is still there. And actually, I'm happy with that. I'd be happy with a lower footfall, but a higher sales conversion. And like for like, some businesses are doing better than before, purely because they've had to change their business model. A lot of our pubs and restaurants have completely changed their business model, and they're actually doing better than before, believe it or not. And there will be winners, but sadly there will also be losers. Yeah.
Thank you. I have to say, some of those figures sound like a news story to me. I'd like to read about those in the papers if we can. Right, can we go to Councillor Barber, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam and Simon, for sticking around to the bitter end this evening. Can I, because there's some really interesting stuff you've been doing there, and I've noticed, for instance, the stickers, the vinyls, as you call them, on the floor in the town centre, and actually the queuing. It's funny how little prompts can affect behaviour so much, because people like glue themselves to them when I've been outside of shops, you know, really determined to make sure they stay on the spot. So they're working really well anecdotally from what I can see. So that's very commendable. Can I just ask a small request that I think will help everyone, is maybe if you have things such as this app that's going out, the promotional deals or the videos, maybe send anything you have to Democratic Services at Colchester Council to distribute to all councillors. Yep. Because, for instance, I would have shared the video. I haven't seen it, but I would have shared it if I had a copy. Because most of my timeline on my personal Facebook is polluted with nonsense, so I miss actually important things such as this. So if we can maybe distribute more information of what you're up to, I think that would be excellent. Councillor King's now going to tell me that he does this already, and I'm going to be horrified when I've missed this. But just from memory, the more information we get from you guys, the more we can share it, and the more that residents know as well. Because if I don't know about certain things, I'm sure the wider borough don't necessarily know as well. But because there's some really good stuff here, so well done. You know, it's such a big challenge.
I think we've got the point. Councillor King, you're back to say something profoundly.
The very briefest of points is to say that the two teams are the marketing and comm are supposed to be connected up. They are working together, and there is an encouragement to make sure that anything that comes out of the bid is put out through our networks, and frankly, if it's helpful to the bid, vice versa. So this may not be perfect, but it's going in the right direction. Combining our marketing is just good sense. But I take your point, Lewis, thank you, and I will check that myself.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, can we move on to Councillor Bourne, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Simon and Sam. Two things. Sam, last time you came, we were a bit light on scrutiny because really you just started, and we said we'd give you a thorough going over this time. I don't feel we have. But what you've provided us with is a lot of information. So we can't say that we've been light on the information that you provided. So thank you very much for that. Simon, I think you were very honest when you said about, you probably didn't say this, but anyway, that there are quite a lot of moaners in Colchester. I don't think we're moany people in Colchester. I think we just have very high expectations, our Colchestrians. And sometimes that comes across as moaning. I just think people want to improve things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it does drag you down a bit when you get quite a bit of moaning. So I do want to commend you in the bid for putting up with some of that moaning, and I'm sure you'll commend us for putting up with a lot of moaning as well. But that's, you know, that's our job to put up with moaning, isn't it? Going forward, do you it's the footfall I'm really interested in. When I go to other towns, and I have been to quite a number of towns during lockdown, obviously once lockdown was when we had the regulations relaxed, their Colchester behaviour is really, really good. We're very obedient people in Colchester. You wouldn't know it from reading social media. You think people are flouting the rules all over the place. So, you know, is it, why is that? Why are we so obedient in Colchester in following the regulations? Because there are people with masks and they do queue and they do wait and there is social distancing. It's quite apparent in the town centre. It is starting to relax a bit, but even though it's relaxing, it's not as anywhere near as bad as other places I've been to in this country. So what is it?
So nice, easy question, Sam. Why are we so obedient in Colchester?
Well, it's all down to the queuing brief, I'd say, but I'll put that aside. I think one thing that's really, really helped, and perhaps we're lucky on, is from day one, the adherence was really high, which almost forced people who weren't to get told off. And trust me, they were getting told off. And usually it was the older generation that were really, really popping at people if they were out of line. It's almost like ants following each other. That's been really great, and actually that's really nice to see. I don't think our residents are any different to others. I just think we're very fortunate that they're very passionate about the town centre and they want the town centre to thrive. And hopefully that's the reason. I'd like to think that they adhere to what they're doing. And we are seeing, I mean, today before the downpour, I haven't seen Sir Isaac Walk busier, honestly, which is really great. And yeah, I thoroughly believe it's the passion that's driving it, but also it helped that from day one the adherence was good.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation at this late hour. I've got no real questions, but I just want to pick up on one thing you did say in the presentation, which I think was important, about the bid being a vital conduit of information between the businesses on the ground and councillors and the council. We need to know, to inform our decisions, really what's actually happening out there. And certainly, I mean, I know myself and Councillor Bourne will be very familiar with Councillor King's constantly evolving recovery slide, which has information which I think is coming from the bid. And it certainly really helped in meetings to know what's going on and inform our opinions. So thank you very much.
Good, thank you. I don't think that's a question, comment. Councillor Hayter?
Yes, thank you. You were talking earlier about the current footfall in the town, the percentages that, as well as good conversion rates in the town. I saw some data this morning in regard to the bigger retailers on the Kantar index, that the average transaction spend is 30% up. Has that trickled down to the independents in the town centre? Are they finding that transaction increase as well?
Yes and no. I think depending on location, some businesses are doing extremely well and some locations simply aren't. And I think that's down to location, not businesses themselves. But I think there's two ways of looking at it, I suppose. There's the nationals that have been able to put the large sales on and able to knock products out at perhaps a cheaper price. And then there's the independents that really are on the brink. Well, some of the nationals are on brink, but a lot of the independents are on the brink and simply can't afford to put a lot of them sales on. Saying that, we are seeing people, the independents' expectations being lower than actual delivery, which is really positive. I mean, the likes of Bill and Bert are performing extremely well on Sir Isaac's at the moment. They're a phenomenal business, and they drive a lot of footfall to that area as well. But sadly, we lost Grain. We've lost Grain on North Hill soon. We've just lost Cardamom Cafe on St John's, and they're two phenomenal businesses. And it's so sad. It really is. But and it pains me to say we're going to lose a lot more. But in the meantime, let's hope that we can do everything in our power to stop too many.
As Sam said, it is a mixed picture, but I equally know there's some stores on Crouch Street that were saying exactly the same as Sam said earlier. Their conversion rate is really high. It wouldn't be right to name individual stores, but there was one had a sale on this time last year. They're doing as much in terms of sales now, but at better margins, simply because the customers are coming in and paying full price. So it's horses for courses, and unfortunately some will lose.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chairman. I went into town for the first time in 7 months and had lunch with my son on Saturday. A good experience, better than I had anticipated. So I think we're in safe hands with Simon and Sam. Keep the good work up. Bless you both.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Chair. I haven't got any questions. I just want to apologise because I lost my connection on Zoom and probably lost the last minute or two of your presentation, Sam. But otherwise, very impressed with the work that's been done across the town. Yeah, I think you guys at the helm are ideal. Looking forward to seeing what happens over the next few months. So thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Just remember, I have gone to Councillor Whitehead. I did ask you, didn't I, Lorcan? Yes, thank you. Right. So just a quick point from me. Again, excellent presentation, and I'm sorry you're right at the very end, but don't think that's any reflection on the importance of the bid and the scrutiny of it. So just from some experience, I've recently been travelling and I went to Edinburgh. And in Edinburgh, all the hotels and main shops were flying flags saying hello. Edinburgh is open. Have we thought, I know we've got the Welcome Back to Colchester campaign, which is good. Have we thought of actually pushing that a bit further so all the shops say we're open, banners across the high street saying we're open, adverts in the local papers, and I don't just mean the Gazette, I mean the Courier, the Tiptree Tribune, all those things saying we're open. Have we done a bit of that going on?
I think there's a lot more that needs to be done for sure. And like I said earlier on, we haven't done the hard work and then stopped for sure. For example, we're now looking at Christmas and we're now about to invest in the biggest Christmas we believe Colchester is ever going to have because it's a make or break couple of months. But yeah, we're looking at going above and beyond, like you said, and getting in people's faces to say we're open, come and check us. Because believe it or not, a lot of the consumers on the survey are still saying there's a lot of closed shops and there's not. We've got to go a lot further to beat that perception.
So I'm thinking a lot of villages, parish councils have parish magazines, a lot of residents' action people, I mean, resident action groups have magazines. These are the things actually people will read and pick up. So I'm just thinking.
No, it's a great idea. Yeah, for sure.
It's just a way of just giving you some further ideas on what has been a very successful campaign and difficult times. And I just want to add, it's not my place as chair of this, but in my other capacity, how helpful both you have been and also Simon Blacksell has been as well, along with Councillor David King, and what we have been trying to do and what we are doing as well to make sure we're safer, greener and healthier as we go forward. So thank you for that. Not easy in places like Colchester and elsewhere, but you have been very helpful. Thank you. Any final points, colleagues? I think not. So can I just again resolve to say our recommendations to thank both Mr. Simon Blacksell and Sam Good for coming along for the work they are doing and the work they are going to be doing as we reopen Colchester Town Centre more and more. Are we content with that? And if we are, may I have a seconder, please? I'm going to say Councillor Lorcan Whitehead, because I saw a nod for us and everybody else's. We have to go through the vote again. We can't just do it on that nod. So, Mr. Clifford, could you please take us through the vote?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Barber.
4. Sorry. 4.
Councillor Bentley.
4.
Councillor Bourne.
4.
Councillor Dundas.
4.
Councillor Hayter.
4.
Councillor Hogg.
4.
Councillor McCarthy.
4.
And Councillor Whitehead.
4.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all our presenters. The last item of the work programme I won't do, but I will just say to the group spokes, I think we should sit down and just have a look at that, because we did have a conversation earlier this year when Beverly was still chair, that we should hand some of this stuff over to governance and audit, sorry, it's getting late. So I just need to make sure we are doing that, and maybe want other items to replace some of those things on this. We'll put that together as one of our regular meetings. And I thank you all for being here so late. I was trying to get it done a bit earlier. It was certainly done before 10. But, you know, it's very important we give the last item as much scrutiny as the first item. I think we've done that. Good scrutiny is not all about being a critical friend. It's about being a good critical listener. And I think tonight we have done that. And I think that's been a very good piece of scrutiny. For all those who are watching, this is the second late night for many of my colleagues, but the mini-series that is Scrutiny is now coming to an end. We are back next month. To the rest of you, thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Mr. Clifford, and all the Democratic team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.